The keys hit the folding table between the inventory sheets and a sweating tray of grocery store sandwiches. "Congratulations," Mason said. "You're a homeowner." Nora looked at the cracked yellow float attached to the ring. June Bug had been written across it in Vivian's neat black lettering, though the J had faded until it resembled a fishing hook. Her Uncle Cal kept counting fuel filters. "Don't start. I didn't say anything." "You made a face." "It doesn't have an engine," Nora said. Mason pulled a pickle from his sandwich and ate it separately. "Then your commute will be extremely predictable." Beth's head lifted, but only for a second. She stood beside Vivian's old desk, with masking tape stuck to her sleeve, sorting personal photographs from Marina receipts. Outside the office windows, the June Bug leaned against the outer dock, its stained curtains closed. Cal had already moved it away from the good slips. Beyond it, Grace Bell stood at the end of the fuel dock in a red raincoat, watching the family divide the marina. When she caught Nora's eye, she tapped 2 fingers against the leather folder tucked under her arm. Then she mouthed the question through the glass. "Have you told them?" Nora looked down before anyone noticed. 3 days after Vivian Vale's funeral, the marina smelled exactly as it always had. Cold lake water, gasoline, wet rope, and the cinnamon gum Vivian hid in every drawer. The sameness felt disrespectful. The gulls still screamed over discarded French fries. The ancient ice machine still shuddered as though preparing to launch itself through the wall. A pontoon owner called twice that morning to ask whether his winter cover had been checked, and Cal answered both times by saying, "We're in transition," in the deep voice he used when he wanted ordinary confusion to sound corporate. The funeral flowers had been moved to the windowsill, where they blocked the view of B-Dock. Someone had sent an arrangement shaped like an anchor. Vivian would have hated it. She wasn't in the Navy, she would have said. And those carnations are dyed. Nora reached for the houseboat keys. Cal placed one finger over the inventory sheet. "You need to sign first." The paper listed the bequests in a law clerk's tidy columns. Vivian's inland house and 70% of her remaining cash went to Beth. Vale Marina Services, including its equipment, inventory, trade name, and accounts, went to Cal and Mason. The June Bug, identified by registration number and the phrase together with its furnishings, went to Nora. Vivian had signed the will 7 years ago, when the June Bug still had a functioning stern drive engine, and Nora was supposedly 1 semester away from returning to college. The engine had been sold 14 months ago. Nora had listed it herself, taken photographs from 6 angles, answered 47 messages asking whether it was still available, and watched a man from Indiana haul it away in the back of a pickup. The proceeds had covered the county tax bill and most of the materials for the emergency repair on C-Dock. Nobody had objected then. Nobody besides Vivian had asked what losing the engine did to the value of the boat. Nora signed. Mason leaned over her shoulder. "Don't worry, I'm sure there's a thriving market for stationary maritime real estate. You practiced that, didn't you?" "A little." He smiled, and she almost did too. That was Mason's most irritating gift. He could be cruel in a way that invited you to admire the phrasing. As children, no, not children anymore, she reminded herself. They had both crossed 30's border, or were close enough to see it. He had been the cousin who could make her laugh during family arguments. At 31, he worked for a commercial property group in Columbus, and wore loafers that looked allergic to mud. He had cried harder than anyone at Vivian's graveside. Now he slid Vivian's brass letter opener into a box marked Office, Cal/Mason. "That stays," Nora said. Mason glanced at it. "It's office equipment. It was Grandpa's. And then it was the Marina's. It opened Christmas cards. It also opens vendor invoices. Versatile little sword." Beth removed the letter opener from his hand and placed it with the family photographs. "There," she said. "International conflict avoided." Cal exhaled through his nose. He was 62, broad through the chest, with silver hair he kept clipped close enough to reveal the pale dent from an old boating accident. At the funeral, he had held Beth while she shook. He had also spent the reception asking the marina's insurance agent whether the policy survived a change in ownership. "Can we finish one room without turning it into a tribunal?" he asked. "Nora, take whatever's personally yours from the back. By the end of next week, I need that room cleared." Beth folded a strip of tape over itself. "She can stay with me." It came too quickly, an answer prepared before Nora had asked the question. Cal nodded. "Good. Solved." Nora glanced toward the narrow hallway behind the office. Her room was at the end, barely wide enough for a twin bed, a metal wardrobe, and the chair where she piled clothes because opening the wardrobe made the door hit the bed. She had lived there for 2 years and 8 months. The first month had been temporary. The next 6 were until Vivian got stronger. After that, no one bothered naming the arrangement. "I have the June bug," she said. Beth's mouth pinched. "Honey, it's October. It has heat. It has a heater. Those aren't always the same thing." Mason laughed into his sandwich. Cal flipped to the next page. "Do what you want. Just understand that outer slip electric is changing once we review the utility costs." "The marina can't subsidize, Cal," Beth said. "What? She needs practical information." Nora slipped the keys into her sweatshirt pocket. "I've been reading the electric meters every month for 3 years, and now someone else will be reading them." The words landed quietly. Cal did not look pleased with himself. That almost made them worse. Nora left before her face answered for her. The wind had picked up, wrinkling the inlet into small gray scales. Vale Marina sat in a narrow cove on the southern side of Lake Morrow, protected from the worst weather by 2 wooded points. In summer, every slip held a boat, the picnic tables filled before noon, and Vivian complained about people using the shower block to wash dogs. In October, half the docks were empty, and the remaining vessels seemed abandoned after some orderly evacuation. Nora crossed the fuel dock toward Grace, but the red raincoat had disappeared. A dark green pickup was climbing the gravel road beyond the storage sheds. Maybe Grace had gotten tired of waiting. Maybe that was for the best. A gust pushed Nora sideways as she stepped onto the outer walkway. 2 blue fenders squeaked between the June bug and the dock. The boat had once been white with a broad green stripe. Now the white was the color of old teeth, and the stripe had bleached to something like celery. Someone had taped a pink note to the door. "Personal property of Nora Vale," it read. Below that, in Mason's handwriting, "Please do not tow to Hawaii." She tore it off, unlocked the door, and had to shoulder it twice before the swollen frame gave way. The smell arrived first: damp plywood, mouse droppings, old upholstery, and beneath all of it, the faint medicinal sweetness of Vivian's peppermint lotion. Nora stood in the doorway while the boat rocked under her. "Don't do that," she whispered, though whether she meant the boat, her grandmother, or herself was unclear. The galley occupied the left wall. A tiny propane stove sat under a metal cover, and 3 brown mugs hung from hooks above the sink. One hook was empty. Vivian had taken her favorite mug ashore during her last summer aboard and never brought it back. It still sat beside the coffee machine in the marina office, probably destined for a Cal/Mason box because it had once held pens. Nora opened a cabinet. A stack of paper plates had fused together from moisture. In another, she found 2 cans of tomato soup, an expired box of crackers, and the cinnamon gum Vivian claimed she did not chew. The main cabin had a built-in bench on either side, both upholstered in green vinyl split along the seams. The curtains were printed with tiny anchors. Vivian had sewn them during what she called her nautical period, which had apparently required anchors on every surface, whether it moved or not. At the stern, a square plywood cover sat over the empty engine compartment. Nora lifted it. The space below was clean, except for dust, 2 washers, and a dry brown leaf. She had scrubbed it after the engine was removed because Vivian could not bear to look at the grease marks. The seller from Indiana had handed Nora a cashier's check, then asked if her grandfather was around, so he could explain how he planned to brace the opening. "My grandmother owns it," Nora had said. "Sure," the man replied, "but who handles the mechanical decisions?" Vivian had laughed for 10 minutes when Nora told her. Now Nora lowered herself onto the floor beside the opening and ran her thumb over one of the old mounting holes. She heard footsteps on the dock. "If that's another ownership label, I'm putting it on Mason's forehead." Beth appeared in the doorway holding a cardboard box. "Your grandmother's mug." The mug was cream-colored, with Vivian printed in fading red letters. Beth had filled it with the pens from the desk. Nora took it. "Thanks." Her mother surveyed the cabin without stepping inside. Beth was 56 and still dressed as if a bank manager might appear unexpectedly to evaluate her. Even on inventory day, she wore dark trousers and small gold earrings. The wind had loosened strands from her careful blonde-gray bob. "You can't stay here," she said. "I can. That's not the same thing. I lived in worse apartments. And you hated them. I hated the roommates. Beth looked at the empty engine cover. Cal shouldn't have moved it all the way out here. He wanted the inside slips clear. For what? Nora waited. It was a simple question, but Beth had asked it in the tone of someone realizing she might not like how much she had failed to ask. You don't know? Know what? Across the inlet, Cal and Mason emerged from the office with a man Nora had not seen before. The man wore a navy-quilted vest and held a tablet. Cal pointed toward the fuel dock, then the repair shed, then swept one hand across the rows of slips. Mason spoke while the man nodded. Beth followed Nora's gaze. Oh, she said. They have a buyer coming Monday. They only read the will yesterday. They met him 2 weeks ago. Beth looked at her sharply. Vivian was still alive 2 weeks ago. Yes. Did she know? Not from them. The wind shoved the houseboat against its fenders. Squeak. Pause. Squeak. Beth stepped into the cabin at last and set her purse on the bench, immediately wiping the spot with her palm. Nora, Cal is trying to keep the place from collapsing. Your grandmother left bills. There may be things you don't understand. Nora looked at her mother's hand moving across the cracked green vinyl. There are definitely things somebody doesn't understand. Beth stopped wiping. From the office, Mason called. Beth, we need you to identify some jewelry. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she seemed ready to say something. An apology, perhaps, or a warning. Instead, she picked up her purse. My offer is real, she said. The house has 2 bedrooms. You don't need to prove anything by freezing out here. Who would I be proving it to? Beth's expression tightened with the effort of not answering honestly. She stepped back onto the dock. Nora watched her walk toward the office, one hand holding her hair against the wind. Cal waved her over, without interrupting whatever he was telling the man with the tablet. Beth went. The boat shifted again, and the keys in Nora's pocket pressed against her hip. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Grace Bell. We need to talk before Monday. Do not sign anything Cal gives you. Nora read it twice, then a third time, though the words did not change. Outside, Cal's prospective buyer photographed the marina as if it already belonged to him. Nora typed, I haven't signed anything. 3 dots appeared immediately. That is not what I asked. She put the phone face down on the galley counter. Through the salt-fogged window, the man in the vest crouched to photograph the base of the fuel pumps. Mason stood behind him with his hands in his coat pockets, smiling in the patient way he did when other people used technology. Cal had gone into the repair shed. Nora's phone buzzed again. 4 o'clock, my house. Grace did not add please. At 3:57, Nora left the marina by the footpath along the inlet. Grace's house was less than half a mile away, but reaching it by road took twice that distance because the gravel lane curled around the Bell property. Vivian had always walked. She said driving to a neighbor's house encouraged people to pretend they had somewhere else to be. Wet leaves stuck to Nora's boots. Through the bare trees, she could see the marina in pieces, the blue roof of the shower block, the empty storage racks, the June bug rocking at the far dock. From that distance, it looked almost cheerful. Grace Bell's house sat low against the hill, built of gray stone with a screened porch facing the water. A pair of rubber boots stood beside the door. One had a folded newspaper stuffed into it to absorb rain. Grace opened the door before Nora knocked. You're late. Nora checked her phone. It's 4. It's 4:01 in the kitchen. Grace was 74 and built like a fence post, straight and narrow, with white hair cut bluntly below her ears. She wore the red raincoat over a navy bathrobe and house slippers shaped like trout. Nora looked at the slippers. They were a gift, Grace said. Don't encourage her. Who? My sister. Come in. The kitchen smelled of onions and burnt toast. Grace hung her raincoat on the back of a chair, revealing that the bathrobe had silver stars on it. The leather folder from the dock lay on the table beside 2 cups of coffee. Nora sat. Grace remained standing. Does Cal know? No. Does Beth? No. Does Mason? Grace. I'm checking whether no means no or whether no means you assume someone read something. Nora wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. It was too hot to hold, but she kept them there. I thought they knew before Vivian died. Afterward, I realized they didn't. And you decided? I haven't decided anything. You let them walk through the property with Nolan Pierce. That was the man in the vest. He dresses like that because he owns 3 boats and cannot fix any of them. Despite herself, Nora smiled. Grace sat across from her. His company has been trying to get onto this lake for 6 years. They bought Harbor Point and doubled every slip rate before the first summer. Nolan is not touring Vail Marina because he admires the gulls. He can buy Cal's company. He can buy a sack of wet leaves, too. Neither gives him permission to run a marina on my shoreline. Nora looked toward the folder. Grace did not touch it. You remember what I told you when we signed? That you'd terminate the lease if I missed 2 payments. The other thing, no dogs in the shower block. That is also important. That the lease was mine personally, not Vivian's, not the company's, and that I couldn't assign it without your written consent. Grace nodded. So why are you behaving like the lease is a shameful medical condition? Nora lifted her coffee, found it still too hot, and put it down. My grandmother had been dead for 72 hours when I figured out Cal didn't know. I wasn't going to stand beside her casket and say, by the way, that marina you think you inherited, you can't operate it without me. You could have told him yesterday. He didn't ask. That is childish. Yes. Grace's eyebrows rose, apparently disappointed that Nora had deprived her of an argument. Nora stared into the coffee. But it's also true. On the refrigerator behind Grace, a photograph showed Vivian and Grace in sun hats, holding opposite ends of a fish neither appeared willing to touch. The picture was at least 20 years old. Vivian's smile was wide and unguarded. She should have told them, Nora said. She should have told everyone many things. She let Cal believe the company still had the shore lease. Cal received the non-renewal notice. He called me and explained that I didn't understand commercial property. He said he could straighten it out. He said you were doing paperwork for Vivian because you needed to feel useful. Nora looked up. Grace's face did not soften. That was one of Nora's favorite things about her. Grace could deliver pain without dressing it as sympathy. When was that? Last spring, before you came here with your repair schedule. He knew you wouldn't renew. He knew I would not renew with Vail Marina Services. Perhaps he thought I would panic when Vivian got sicker. Perhaps he assumed the land would lose all value if his family removed the docks. Would it? Yes. For a while. Grace folded her arms. People who only understand leverage generally assume everyone else thinks in threats. The boiler clicked somewhere beneath the floor. Nora remembered the day she had brought Grace the repair schedule. Rain had leaked through the marina office ceiling into a 5-gallon bait bucket. Vivian was asleep in the back room, exhausted after an appointment. Nora had spent the previous night adding figures until the column stopped swimming. She had not thought she was claiming anything. She had been trying to keep the electricity on. I signed because there wasn't another way, she said. That is why most serious things get signed. It wasn't supposed to turn into this. What was it supposed to turn into? Another season. Grace studied her. That may still be all it becomes. Nora knew the numbers. 5 years on paper did not mean 5 survivable years. The lease required rising rent, safety repairs, insurance, public access, and environmental maintenance. Vivian's company owned nearly everything needed to meet those requirements, and Cal now owned the company. What happens Monday? Nora asked. I attend Mr. Pierce's inspection. You invited yourself? It is my land. What are you going to say? That depends what you say first. Grace pushed the leather folder across the table. Nora opened it. On top lay a copy of the shore lease, its corners crisp, the signature page marked with a blue tab. Beneath it were electrical inspection notices, rent receipts, and the original letter declining to renew Vail Marina Services. Nora closed the folder. I have copies. Cal may not. He has one, certified mail. He may possess one. That does not mean he has met it. Grace stood and carried her coffee to the sink. Tell him before Monday. Nora left with the folder under her arm. By the time she returned, the office lights were off. Cal's truck and Beth's sedan were gone. Mason remained in the parking lot, struggling to fit Vivian's wooden swivel chair into the back of his SUV. You know the seat comes off, Nora said. He straightened, breathing hard. Of course I do. You were trying to force it through sideways. I was building confidence. She set the folder on the hood of his SUV and loosened the threaded post beneath the seat. The chair separated in 2 turns. Mason stared at it. You could have let me retain a little dignity. I thought you inherited enough. He laughed, then caught sight of the folder. What's that? There it was. A clean opening. She could tell him, Mason would swear, call Cal, and somehow make Nora's failure to speak the loudest fact in the story. But at least Monday would not be an ambush. Marina paperwork, she said. His mouth tilted. You mean my paperwork? No, I don't. For a moment, neither moved. Wind rattled the shrink wrap on a stored cruiser behind them. Mason's humor drained away. Are you going to be difficult about all of this? About what? Transition, access. You know where everything is, and Dad is trying not to treat you like staff. He told me to clear my room. That's because Nolan's people will need the office. So, the sale is done? Nothing is done. You showed him the place before Vivian died. Mason rubbed a hand over his jaw. Dad asked me to make some calls. We knew where this was going. Nora looked at Vivian's chair in two pieces. Where what was going? He glanced toward the office windows. Don't make me say it in the parking lot. She was dying in the back room while you measured the property. That is not fair. No, it's precise. Mason flinched. He picked up the chair seat and placed it in the SUV, with more care than he had shown before. She wanted the marina kept in the family, he said. She wanted it kept open. Same thing. No. He shut the hatch. Nolan's company can invest in it. New docks, a real restaurant, better security. Dad thinks they'll keep the name. Generous. What are you planning to do with it? Run the whole place from a broken houseboat? I'm not planning anything. That's kind of your problem, Nora. He regretted it immediately. She saw that, which did not help. Mason climbed into his SUV. Before closing the door, he looked at the leather folder again. Monday at 9, he said. Dad wants you here because Nolan has operational questions. I'll be here. Nora spent the weekend moving out of the back room. Beth returned Saturday with plastic storage bins and a slow cooker full of beef stew, both offered in place of conversation. She folded Nora's clothes even after Nora asked her not to, pairing socks that had never previously met. Cal removed the computer Sunday morning. Mason labeled the filing cabinets, though he left the files inside because he did not know which mattered. Neither man gave Nora anything to sign. On the June bug, she cleared enough space to sleep on the forward berth. The little electric heater glowed orange and warmed an area roughly the size of a dinner plate. She ate stew from Vivian's mug because the bowls smelled like mildew. Monday morning arrived bright, cold, and offensively beautiful. Nolan Pierce came at 8:45 with a woman named Dana from his company and a printed inspection list. Cal wore a sport coat. Mason had brought coffee for everyone, except Nora, then noticed and offered her his. At 8:58, Grace walked down the fuel dock in her red raincoat. Cal's expression changed before she said a word. Grace, he called, didn't realize you'd be joining us? You're inspecting my property, she said. I thought I might. Nolan looked from Grace to Cal. Your property? The shoreline and water access, Grace said. Cal smiled too broadly. There's a legacy ground lease, routine structure. We're handling the transfer. Grace stopped beside Nora. There is no transfer. Silence moved through the group with almost physical weight. Cal turned to Nora, not Grace. What is she talking about? Nora could hear a loose halyard striking a mast 3 slips away. Metal against metal, steady as a clock. Grace held out her hand. Nora gave her the leather folder. Grace removed the lease, opened it to the blue tab, and placed one finger beneath the tenant's name. Nora holds the Marina Lease, she said. Your company hasn't held it for 18 months. Cal did not look at the page. He looked at Nora as if Grace had just accused her of setting a fire. What did you do? Nolan Pierce shifted his inspection list from one hand to the other. Dana stepped closer to read the lease, but Grace closed the folder. That is a reasonable question for your own attorney, Grace said. I wasn't speaking to you. You should. It's my lease. It was my mother's lease. No, your mother's company had a lease. It expired. Cal took one step toward Nora, and somehow she got another one. Grace moved between them so neatly that it seemed accidental. She came only to Cal's shoulder, but he stopped. Nolan cleared his throat. Cal, maybe we should take 5 and get aligned. We are aligned. We were told the operating company controlled the site. It does. No, Grace said. Mason stared at Nora. His face had gone blank in a way she recognized from family dinners when a joke had become an argument faster than he could redirect it. You had that folder Friday, he said. Yes. And you stood there while I asked what was in it. You said it was your paperwork. This is not the time for cousin court, Cal snapped. Dana hugged her tablet against her vest. Our letter of intent is contingent on site control. If the seller has no assignable land rights, we need to pause. Nothing needs to pause. Cal finally looked at the lease, though he did not take it from Grace. There's obviously been some irregular arrangement while my mother was ill. Nora felt the cold before she understood what he meant. Grace understood immediately. Choose your next sentence carefully. Cal's jaw flexed. My mother was undergoing treatment. Nora was living here, controlling the mail, taking her to appointments. I drove her to appointments because you were busy. I was working. So was I. For her, for the marina, which she owned. Nora's voice came out sharper than she intended. A pair of ducks lifted from the inlet, wings beating the water. Everyone watched them for one grateful second. Mason lowered his coffee. Why didn't Grandma tell us? Nora almost laughed. It was such a Mason question. Not why had the old lease failed, or what agreement replaced it, but why had the information not arrived ceremonially in his hands? She thought Cal knew, Nora said. I knew Grace was posturing over renewal terms. I do not posture, Grace said. I decline. Cal ignored her. Mom told me Nora was helping with a temporary extension. She told me you had the notice, Nora said. What notice? The non-renewal notice you received by certified mail. Cal's eyes flicked toward Grace. That small movement told Nora more than his denial could have. Nolan noticed too. He folded his inspection list. I think we're done for today. Cal turned. You drove 2 hours. At least see the repair building. I've seen enough to know we're missing a material piece. We can solve that. Nolan looked at Nora for the first time, as someone involved in the transaction rather than a woman standing near the coffee. Are you willing to assign your lease? Every face turned toward her. The honest answer was that she had no idea. On Friday, she had owned a damp houseboat, and a fact nobody had asked about. Now the fact had become a decision, and everyone expected it to arrive fully formed. Not today, she said. Cal gave a short, disbelieving laugh. She doesn't know what she's saying. I know what not today means. Nora, Beth said. Nora had almost forgotten her mother was there. Beth stood near the pump controls, holding Mason's extra coffee in both hands. Her face was pale. Nolan nodded once. Then we'll pause. We have a signed letter, Cal said. A non-binding letter contingent on due diligence. Mason stepped toward him. Dad. Cal pulled away before Mason could touch his arm. Nolan and Dana walked back toward the parking lot. Cal followed them, talking about curable title defects, until Nolan stopped and said something too low for Nora to hear. Cal did not follow after that. The doors of the black SUV closed, tires ground over gravel. Then the vehicle disappeared up the hill. Grace exhaled through her nose. Well, he took that better than I expected. Mason stared at her. That was better? He didn't threaten to sue me. He'll save that for lunch. Grace held the folder out to Nora. Make more copies. I already have copies. Make copies of the copies. Beth set the coffee on a piling. Would someone please explain what just happened? Cal came back down the dock with his sport coat open and his fists closed. What happened? He said. Is Nora destroyed a sale out of spite? Your sale required something you don't own, Grace replied. Stay out of my family. You brought your family onto my property. Beth looked from Grace to Nora. How long have you had this lease? Nora wanted to say 18 months, but everyone had heard that. Beth was asking a different question. How long have I known they didn't know? Since Friday. Friday. Beth repeated it softly. You watched us sort everything. You watched Cal meet with that man. I tried to tell you on the boat. You asked whether I knew there was a buyer. And you defended Cal before you even knew what he was doing. Beth flinched. That doesn't mean you couldn't tell me. Would you have believed me? The question was too cruel because it was sincere. Beth's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Cal turned on Grace. I need to speak with my niece alone. No, Nora said. It was the first thing she had said all morning, without doubt. Cal looked at her. Excuse me? You don't get to order her away from her own dock. Mason made a low sound and rubbed both hands over his face. Grace tucked the folder under Nora's arm. I'll be at the house. As she passed Cal, she paused. For what it's worth, your mother did not arrange this behind your back. I refused to lease to your company. Nora presented a workable plan and assumed the obligations herself. While Mom was medicated, Vivian called me controlling and said my rent increases were an insult to inland civilization. Her mind was fine. Grace continued up the dock. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Water slapped beneath the boards. Cal's voice became quieter. Office. Now. Nora followed because refusing would have turned the dock into a stage, and because the office still contained Vivian's mug-shaped coffee stain on the desk blotter. Beth and Mason came behind them. Cal shut the door. The anchor-shaped funeral arrangement had begun to sag. One dyed blue carnation had fallen onto the windowsill. "Show me the full lease," Cal said. Nora placed the folder on the desk. Cal opened it and read standing up. Mason leaned over his shoulder. They moved quickly at first, then returned to the beginning and slowed. Beth sat in Vivian's chair, or the replacement chair, Nora corrected. Vivian's chair was in two pieces in Mason's SUV. This one wobbled. "You signed personally?" Mason asked. "Yes. This rent schedule is brutal. Grace reduced it the first year because of the electrical work. You paid the deposit?" "Yes." "With what?" "My savings." Cal tapped the signature page. "Mom reimbursed you." "No. You expect me to believe you had this kind of money?" "I had $11,000. From where?" "Working. For the company. At night, too. Bookkeeping for Inez's cafe, the boat club, and 2 repair shops. I was going back to school, remember? Everyone kept telling me to save." Beth looked at her. "You told me you'd use some of it for Vivian's care." "I did. How much do you have left?" "This isn't about my bank balance. It is if you think you can operate this place," Cal said. Mason turned another page. Insurance, utilities, dock maintenance, environmental inspection, all tenant responsibility. "I can read." "Then you know this lease doesn't make you an owner. It makes you liable for everything that goes wrong on land you'll never own." "Thank you, Mason. I'm not insulting you. I'm telling you Dad's company owns the docks, pumps, lift, service truck, reservation system, tools. The computer you removed. Sunday has the reservation system." "Exactly." Something passed across his face when he heard himself. Cal pulled out the desk chair and sat. His anger had settled into calculation, which Nora found more frightening. "This is solvable," he said. Beth let out a small breath. Cal placed both palms on the folder. "Nora assigns the lease to the company. We compensate her for the deposit and any documented expenses. She gets a position during transition in housing for 6 months." "A position doing what?" Nora asked. "Operations liaison." Mason glanced at the floor. "Is that a real job?" "It's what you've been doing." "No, apparently what I've been doing is controlling a sick woman's mail." Cal's face hardened. "I was angry. You were specific. And you concealed a major business agreement. The agreement was in this office. Don't play word games. You knew what we believed. What you believed was that Vivian left you a working marina. She did. She left you a company. Because she wanted Mason and me to continue the business. Then why didn't either of you know the shore lease was gone?" Cal stood so abruptly the chair rolled into the filing cabinet. Beth rose too. "Enough." "No," Cal said. "She has spent years letting everyone believe she sacrificed her life for Mom. And now we find out she positioned herself to take the only asset that matters." Nora's ears began to ring. "I didn't take it. You put it in your name. Grace wouldn't lease to the company because you poisoned that relationship." "Dad," Mason said. Cal pointed at Nora. "You were here every day. You controlled what Mom heard, who she saw, what bills got paid, and now, conveniently, you hold the land under the business she gave us." Beth stepped between them, though she faced Nora. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked again. Not why Cal had ignored the notice. Not why he had brought a buyer before Vivian died. Why hadn't Nora made the family pay attention? Because it had felt humiliating to announce the one thing she had done that mattered. Because Cal would have called it clerical. Because Beth would have asked whether Grace had explained the risks. Because Vivian kept saying she would handle it when she felt stronger. Because part of Nora had wanted one fact they could not talk out from under her. "I don't know," she said. Cal nodded as though she had confessed. He slid the lease across the desk. "My offer stands until noon tomorrow. Deposit, expenses, 6 months housing. And if I say no?" He looked through the office window at the docks. "Then everything my company owns leaves Grace Bell's property. Every pump, every tool, every board we can legally move. You can keep your lease." His gaze shifted toward the June bug at the outer slip, and the boat with no engine. Nobody answered him. The ice machine kicked on with a violent rattle, shaking the pens in Vivian's mug. Mason walked over and unplugged it. Cal gathered the pages into a tidy stack. Noon. He left the office without waiting for Beth or Mason. Beth remained between Nora and the desk, arms folded over herself. You can't possibly be considering this. Which part? Trying to run the marina alone. Cal offered me 6 months to help somebody else run it. That isn't what I mean. I know. Mason picked up the blue carnation from the windowsill. Dye had stained his fingertips. For what it's worth, he said, I didn't know Dad sent Grace a proposal. Is it worth anything? Probably not. He dropped the carnation into the trash. Beth watched him go. Then she turned to Nora. Come home with me tonight. No, not as a condition. Not because I'm taking Cal's side. Are you? Beth pressed her lips together. That's not an impossible question, Mom. I think Cal behaved terribly. That wasn't the question. I also think you're hurt and angry, and signing a lease doesn't give you a business. Nora picked up the folder. I have to make some calls. To whom? People who have boats here. Beth looked genuinely alarmed. Don't involve customers in a family dispute. They're already involved. Some of them paid for storage through March, to Vivian's company, which spent the money. How do you know that? Because I made the deposits. Beth's eyes went toward the filing cabinets as though the correct answer might be labeled inside one. Nora took Vivian's mug from the desk. Cal inherited obligations too. He just hasn't opened that folder yet. She carried the mug and the lease back to the June bug. The outer walkway rolled beneath her feet. Wind shoved at the leather folder, and she clutched it to her chest, suddenly aware that every person in the office could have watched her lose it to the lake. Inside the boat, the heater had tripped the breaker. Nora reset it at the electrical pedestal. The orange coils returned, briefly filling the cabin with the smell of heated dust. She sat at the galley table, opened her laptop, and found the marina spreadsheet she had backed up before Cal removed the office computer. 93 tabs waited along the bottom. Vivian considered deleting old tabs morally equivalent to destroying census records. Nora began with winter storage. 41 customers had prepaid. 28 boats sat on marina racks or block stands owned by the company. 13 remained in slips under shrink wrap. Fuel contracts, spring launch deposits, maintenance credits, restroom cleaning, trash service, pump inspections. The marina existed in a web of promises so ordinary that Cal had mistaken them for background noise. Her phone rang. The screen said, Cal. She let it ring twice before answering. What? Do not contact customers. Mom works fast, Nolan called. He needs confirmation that the site issue can be resolved. I gave him confirmation. I said not today. This is not a joke. I'm not laughing. You have no authority to speak for Vail Marina Services. You have no authority to speak for my lease. A pause opened between them. Cal lowered his voice. Nora, listen to me. You don't understand how quickly this can become expensive. I understand the rent schedule. I mean attorneys. Then use one. Maybe they'll read the certified mail. He hung up. Nora stared at the phone, waiting for satisfaction. What came instead was a queasy tremor in her hands. She opened the contact list and called Ron Mercer. He answered with machinery roaring behind him. If this is about my slip, I paid Vivian in August. It's not about your slip. Then I didn't pay her in August. Ron. The machinery stopped. You sound strange. How much would it cost to keep the fuel pumps operating if Cal removes the control cabinet? Why would Cal remove the control cabinet? Because he owns it. So, I own the lease. Ron was silent long enough that Nora checked the screen. You own what? The shore lease. Since when? Last year. And Cal owns the marina? The company and equipment. That's the dumbest arrangement I've ever heard. I didn't arrange the will. No, but you signed the lease. Grace wouldn't renew with the company. Reasonable woman. Can you answer the question? Ron breathed out slowly. Control cabinet comes out. Pumps are dead. New controls, wiring, inspection. $15,000 if the tanks and dispensers can stay. More if they can't. Nora closed her eyes. The company owns the dispensers. Then you have an attractive concrete pad. Thanks, I aim for clarity. In the background, something metal clanged. Ron said, I'm at Hadley Marine. Come by. I can't leave. You can. The inlet won't escape. The deadline is noon tomorrow. What happens at noon? I'm supposed to hand Cal the lease. Ron's voice changed. Are you going to? I don't know. If you knew, you wouldn't have called me. That doesn't make sense. It will on the drive. Hadley Marine occupied a corrugated steel building 10 miles north, surrounded by boats in various stages of disassembly. Nora arrived to find Ron under the raised motor cover of a faded blue cruiser. Only his boots and the back of his brown jacket were visible. At 68, Ron had retired from repairing marine engines and immediately begun repairing marine engines at half his old rate. He claimed retirement meant he could refuse to work on anything German or owned by a dentist. Nora knocked on the hull. It's open, he called. What is? I don't know. People like hearing that before they enter places. He backed out, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked at her. His gray beard was clipped short on one side and longer on the other. You cut your beard. My glasses fogged. You stopped halfway. Lunch happened. He led her to the back room, where an electric kettle sat on a workbench beside a tower of paper cups. He made instant coffee strong enough to remove paint. Nora described Cal's offer without mentioning his accusation about Vivian. Saying that part aloud would give it shape. Ron listened, leaning against a cabinet of spark plugs. When she finished, he asked, "What are you asking me? Whether the marina can run without Cal's equipment?" No? The answer came so quickly she laughed once. Ron drank his coffee. Not as it is, not right away. That distinction seems decorative. You asked the wrong question. What's the right one? How little of a marina can you afford to run? She looked at him. You don't need every slip, he said. Half of Sea Dock isn't safe anyway. Fuel makes money, but it also eats insurance. No service truck means you stop pretending to offer mobile repair. Shower block stays. It's a permanent improvement under the lease. Cal can't remove buildings without Grace's consent. Lift, company, storage racks, company. Dock sections, company, except anything replaced after my lease began. I paid for six-finger piers. Personally, with rent credits from Grace. Ron nodded. So 6 slips, shower block, access lane, parking, and a houseboat that can't leave. When you say it like that, it sounds worse. Then why are you smiling? Nora stopped. She had been. Ron rinsed his cup in a sink stained black around the drain. Vivian ever offer you the company? No. Did you ask? No. Why not? It was hers. That never stopped Cal. Nora looked through the dirty window at a row of boats resting on stands. Without water beneath them, they looked too heavy to have ever floated. Vivian talked about keeping it in the family, she said. Families love that phrase. Means nobody has to name which person is doing the keeping. He handed her a yellow legal pad. Write down what you need to survive until spring. Not what the marina used to have. Not what Nolan Pierce would put in a brochure. Heat, electricity, safe slips, toilets, insurance, and customers. Those help. I can't sell slips if Cal is dismantling the docks. Then find out whether he is. A threat is not an invoice. Nora drove back with the legal pad on the passenger seat, and Ron's question pressing harder than Cal's deadline. How little of a marina could she afford to run? At 6, Inez Harper arrived at the June Bug carrying a grocery sack and a bakery box. I heard you stole the marina, she said. Nora opened the door wider. That traveled fast. Ron called and said not to believe anything until I heard your version, which is how a person announces there is absolutely something to believe. Inez was 43, with dark curls gathered under a knitted cap and a cafe apron still tied around her waist. She stepped into the cabin, took one breath, and opened a window. It's 38 degrees, Nora said. It smells like a basement married a tackle box. From the grocery sack, Inez produced bread, cheese, apples, coffee, and a jar of soup from the cafe. The bakery box contained a single slice of chocolate cake. What's the cake for? Either congratulations or condolences. Decide before it dries out, Nora told her. Unlike Ron, Inez interrupted every few minutes. You paid $11,000? Not all for the deposit. Beth knew? No. Does Cal know you do my books? He found out this morning. Did he look surprised? He looked suspicious. Good. I've always wanted my muffin invoices involved in a conspiracy. When Nora reached the noon offer, Inez went quiet. You should take it, she said. Nora blinked. You expected me to tell you to fight? Inez said. I own a business. Fighting is expensive. So I assign the lease and become an operations liaison. I didn't say that. I said, You should take the offer if what you want is money back and somewhere warm. There's no shame in deciding you don't want to bleed for this place. What if I do? Then don't pretend it's because Vivian would want you to. Dead people are wonderful business partners. They never cover a shift. Nora looked around the damaged cabin. She left me this. She left Cal the company. Vivian was many things. Infallible wasn't one. That night, after Inez left, Nora ate the cake first and the soup second. She made a list on Ron's yellow pad. Heat, power, insurance, 6 safe slips, restrooms, waste collection, emergency access. By midnight, she had added 14 things and crossed out 9. The heater tripped twice. At 11:40 the next morning, Nora entered the office with the leather folder. Cal sat behind the desk. A 2-page assignment agreement waited in front of him. Beth stood by the window. Mason was absent. Cal checked his watch. I was beginning to think you weren't coming. Nora placed the folder beside the agreement. Beth's shoulders lowered with relief. Nora uncapped a pen. She drew one clean line through the blank marked assignor. Then she set the pen down. I'm keeping the lease. Cal's face did not change. He folded the agreement once, then again. Fine, he said. Outside, a diesel engine started. Nora turned toward the window. The Marina's service truck rolled past with Mason driving. Behind it, a flatbed trailer carried the first section of the storage racks. 2 workers in orange vests walked toward the fuel dock with tool cases. Cal dropped the folded agreement into the trash. Then we start separating what's yours from what's ours. The workers reached the fuel dock before Nora did. One knelt beside the control cabinet and opened it with a drill. The other began photographing the wiring. They wore the name Haskell Marine Removal across their backs. Stop, Nora said. The man with the drill looked toward Cal. Cal came out of the office carrying a clipboard. Proceed. You can't tear out electrical equipment without shutting power down. Haskell knows what they're doing. I didn't say they didn't. I need to notify slip holders before you cut power to the dock. Cal checked the clipboard. We're only disconnecting company property. Electricity doesn't care who inherited the cabinet. The worker stood. He was somewhere in his 50s with safety glasses pressed into a weathered face. She's right. We should isolate the whole fuel branch. Cal's irritation shifted toward him. How long? Depends what's labeled. Nora laughed without humor. The second worker opened the breaker panel, studied the rows of faded masking tape, and said, well, hell. Vivian's labels included fuel, new fuel, old fuel do not use, dock lights maybe, and one breaker marked little freezer that actually powered the laundry room. I can trace it, Nora said. Cal's jaw tightened. Do it. She went to the utility closet for the voltage tester, then remembered the tester had been in the service truck. The service truck was halfway to wherever Mason was taking it. Your equipment, she said. I need it. Cal handed her his phone. Call Mason. She did not take it. I have a phone. Mason answered on the second ring, road noise behind him. Hey, where's the voltage tester? What? The yellow tester from the truck. Passenger door pocket. I need it at the fuel dock. I'm on Route 6. Then turn around. A silence. Dad said the removal crew had their own tools. Their tools don't know Vivian's wiring. Cal held out his hand for the phone. Nora stepped away. Mason lowered his voice. Is he right there? Yes. Did you sign? No. Another silence, longer this time. Okay, he said. I'll turn around. Cal walked toward the workers without speaking. Beth had come out of the office. She stood near the ice machine in the same dark wool coat she had worn to the funeral, watching the men unbolt the cabinet door. Nora wondered whether Cal had asked her to be there, or whether she had arrived hoping to carry her daughter home after the surrender. Did you know this was scheduled? Nora asked. Beth pulled her coat closed at the throat. Cal said he had to protect the company's property. Before my deadline expired, he said contractors were difficult to book. One of the Haskell workers snorted, then turned it into a cough. Nora looked at her mother. He had them here while he was pretending I had a choice. You did have a choice. No, I had a threat with paperwork. Beth glanced at Cal. Please don't make everything worse. I'm not holding the drill. The worker with the safety glasses removed them and rubbed the bridge of his nose. For the record, ma'am, we were told the property would be vacant. It isn't. I see that. Cal returned. Nobody said vacant. I said the business was closed. The lease requires public access through the end of the month, Nora said. The company is closed. The land isn't. This distinction is why people hire attorneys. No, this distinction is why people read leases. The service truck came back 20 minutes later. Mason parked crookedly near the office and climbed out with the voltage tester in his hand. He offered it to Nora. "You could have left the truck," she said. "That wasn't the assignment." "Where are the storage racks going?" "Warehouse in Belford." "What warehouse?" "One Dad rented?" Cal called from the dock. "Mason?" Mason looked at Nora. There were dark crescents beneath his eyes. "I didn't know Haskell was coming before noon," he said. "Congratulations." "On what?" "Another thing you didn't know." He flinched, then followed Cal. The fuel branch took an hour to isolate. Nora stood beside the panel while the worker checked each circuit. Cal paced. Beth left and returned with coffee for everyone, including Nora this time. Nobody drank it while it was hot. The control cabinet came away cleanly. Without it, the pumps stood silent beneath their small green canopy. Haskell tagged the exposed conduit and covered the ends against weather. They did not remove the underground tanks or the concrete pad. Those required permits, drainage work, and more money than Cal had apparently authorized. The empty rectangle on the wall was lighter than the surrounding paint. Nora stared at it. "You can still change your mind," Cal said beside her. "Can I have until noon?" He gave her a look that might once have made her apologize. Haskell moved next to the repair shed. They loaded the portable compressor, battery chargers, welding cart, and hydraulic jacks. Cal carried the clipboard through every room, marking off items. He took Vivian's labeled drawers of spare fittings, though Mason argued that sorting and hauling them would cost more than buying new fittings. "They're company assets," Cal said. "They're 30 years of unidentified screws. Then Nora won't miss them." Nora stood in the doorway. "Take the screws." By mid-afternoon, the shed echoed. The fixed workbenches remained because Grace refused permission to tear them from the wall. Cal demanded to see the lease clause. Grace arrived in her trout slippers, having apparently decided the red raincoat made the rest of the outfit legitimate, and pointed to the section covering permanent improvements. Cal read it twice. The benches were installed by the company. "With my father's lumber," Grace said. "In 1989. We can discuss depreciation if you'd like." He left the benches. The marina's quiet changed as each thing disappeared. Not silence, there were still gulls, wind, dock lines, the slap of water, but an emptiness where useful sounds had lived. No compressor coughing awake, no metal drawers sliding open, no truck door slamming. Nora had complained about those noises for years. At 4, a white pickup stopped beside the office. A man in a canvas jacket stepped out and walked towards Sea Dock. "Where's my boat?" he asked. Cal checked his clipboard. Nora knew the man. "Mr. Talbot, it's still on the rack." "The rack was moved this morning." "Moved where?" Cal stepped forward. "I'm Cal Vale. We're restructuring storage operations." Mr. Talbot squinted at him. "I know who you are. Where's my boat?" "In a secure warehouse in Belford." "You moved it without calling me?" "The facility is insured." "I didn't ask if it was insured." Nora felt the entire day narrow to that question. Cal explained transition, ownership, and improved winter security. Mr. Talbot listened with the pinched patience of someone waiting for a waiter to admit his meal had been given to another table. "I paid for storage here," he said when Cal finished. "On this lake. I come check it after storms. The contract is with Vale Marina Services, and we continue to provide secure storage." Mr. Talbot looked at Nora. "Did you know they were moving it?" "No." "Can they do that?" She chose her words carefully. "Your contract allows off-site storage within 25 miles. Vivian put that in?" "I did. It was for emergency overflow." "And is this an emergency?" Cal answered. "No. It's a business decision." Mr. Talbot's face hardened. Nora wanted to make Cal look worse. It would have been easy. Instead, she gave Mr. Talbot the Belford address and the warehouse manager's phone number from the transport sheet Mason had left in the truck. "You should call before you drive over," she said. "I shouldn't have to drive over." "No." Cal waited until the pickup was gone. "You are not to give out company information? He owns the boat. He is our customer. He was Vivian's customer before you knew his last name. That does not make him yours." "No. It makes him a person you should have called." Cal wrote something on the clipboard. "We'll see how sentimental everyone feels when renewal invoices go out." By sunset, Haskell's first truck was full. They would return the next morning for the lift and removable dock sections. Grace required a written removal diagram before allowing any work that might disturb anchoring or block public access. Cal accused her of delaying him. She agreed. Nora went to the June bug after dark. The cabin was colder than outside because the breaker had tripped again. She reset it, waited, and watched the orange heater glow. Vivian's mug sat in the sink beside the soup jar. Someone knocked. Mason entered carrying a cardboard box. If that's more company property, there's not much left. It's yours. Inside were Nora's work gloves, 2 sweaters, her alarm clock, and a framed photograph of Vivian standing behind the marina counter. Nora was beside her, squinting into the sun. Cal's shoulder appeared at the far edge, mostly cut off. Mom packed the room, Mason said. She thought it would be easier. For whom? He sat on the bench without removing his coat. Dad wants the reservation back up. No. He says it belongs to the company. The customer list does. My personal computer doesn't. Can you separate it? Eventually. Mason looked around the cabin. This thing used to feel bigger. We used to be smaller. He touched a split in the vinyl with one finger. You really plan to sleep here all winter? I plan to sleep here tonight. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. The boat bumped harder than usual against the dock. A second impact followed, wood striking wood. Nora went outside with Mason behind her. The wind had shifted. One of the outer walkway's anchor lines had slackened, pulling the dock crooked. The June bug's stern swung toward an exposed bolt at the corner. Nora grabbed a line and hauled. Without the engine, she could not use thrust to hold the boat off. Mason caught the rail and pushed with both hands, his loafers sliding on wet boards. Fender, Nora said. Where? Behind you. That blue sausage? Yes, the blue sausage. He kicked it toward her. Nora jammed it between the hull and the bolt just before the stern swung back. The fender compressed with a squeal. Mason braced himself against the rail. Is this dock safe? It was. What does that mean? Nora pointed across the dark water. White paint marks glowed faintly along the hinges connecting the outer walkway to B dock. Haskell had marked the section for removal. The June bug was tied to a dock Cal planned to take in the morning. Mason followed her finger and swore. Did you know? Nora asked. No, she laughed, exhausted. You've got to find a new sentence. He looked toward the parking lot where Cal's truck had already gone. I can call him and ask him what? Whether he remembered I live here? Mason had no answer. Nora tightened the line around the cleat. Her fingers had gone numb. The empty marina stretched behind her, half dismantled and entirely due for rent. Mason removed his coat and draped it over the rail. What are you doing? Helping you move the boat. It has no engine, I'm aware. It was the basis of an excellent joke. We need another boat to tow it. Then who has one? Nora looked toward the dark repair shed and thought of the 6-finger piers she had paid to replace, the safe section near the shower block, and the people Cal still believed were background noise. She called Ron. He answered on the 4th ring. This better involve fire. I need a tow. A pause. June. Bug? Yes. Where to? Nora looked at the unlit slips nearest the repair shed. Home, she said, though she did not yet know if the word was true. Ron arrived 27 minutes later in a work skiff with one headlight, no windshield, and an engine loud enough to wake the dead out of spite. He eased alongside the June bug and tossed Nora a line. You called this an emergency? The dock is being removed at 8. That's an appointment. It becomes an emergency if we wait until 7:59. Ron looked at Mason, who stood on the walkway in shirt sleeves, arms folded tightly against the cold. Your father know you're here? Mason took the line. I'm 31. That wasn't my question. No. Good. Tie a bowline. Mason began making something that resembled a knot drawn by a nervous witness. Ron watched him. Have you ever been on a boat? I've been on many boats, apparently as furniture. Nora took the line and tied it to the forward cleat. Ron passed a second one for the stern, then climbed aboard the June bug. He inspected the empty engine compartment, tested the steering wheel, and looked at the dark instrument panel. Steering cables frozen. We're towing at 30 yards. Water has killed people in less. Do you have to sound happy about that? It's the only part of retirement I enjoy. They rigged the skiff alongside the June bug, rather than pulling it from ahead. Ron explained that the skiff would act as the missing engine, pushing and steering the larger boat against its hull. Nora took the stern line. Mason stood at the bow with a long dock pole and strict instructions not to push against anything he could not afford to replace. "What can I afford?" he asked. "Water," Ron said. "Push against water." They released the outer lines. For one breath, nothing happened. Then the wind took the houseboat, and the June bug drifted away from the marked dock with the slow, heavy independence of a building deciding to walk. Nora's stomach dropped. "Easy," Ron said. "I am easy." "You're strangling that line." The skiff's engine growled. Ron brought the houseboat's bow around. Mason used the pole to keep them clear of an empty piling, braced too late, and nearly followed the pole into the lake. Nora caught the back of his belt. "I had it," he said. "You were horizontal, part of the technique." The cabin windows passed beneath the dock lights. In the dark glass, Nora saw the three of them reflected together. Ron steady at the skiff's controls, Mason leaning over the rail in his white shirt. Nora hunched around a rope, as though force alone could keep everything she owned from drifting loose. The June bug reached the safe section beside the repair shed. Nora stepped onto the finger pier and secured the bow. Mason tied the stern line correctly on his second attempt. Ron added spring lines, adjusted the fenders, and made her retie one knot without explaining why until she saw how the boat pulled under wind. "There," he said. "Now it's a house again." The electrical pedestal on that slip worked. Nora plugged in the shore cord, and warm yellow light filled the cabin windows. Mason stood on the dock with his hands under his arms. "Can I have my coat back?" Nora had forgotten it was still draped over the outer rail. "I'll get it," she said. Ron caught her sleeve. "Dock's shifting." "Leave it. It's a good coat," Mason said. "Then you should have loved it sooner." Mason looked across the water. One sleeve had fallen into the lake. The coat moved gently with the crooked walkway, a dark shape waiting for someone who would not return. "I hated that coat," he said. Ron left after making Nora promise to call if the lines creaked, snapped, loosened, tightened too much, or developed opinions. Mason remained beside the June bug. "You can go," Nora said. "My keys are in the coat." She stared at him. He smiled weakly. "Kidding. That was almost your last excellent joke." He shoved his hands into his pockets. "Dad wasn't trying to make you homeless. He marked the dock attached to my home for removal. He probably didn't think about where the boat was. That defense is worse." "I know." Nora climbed aboard. Mason followed without being invited, ducking beneath the swollen door frame. The cabin had warmed by perhaps 2 degrees. He looked at the orange heater, then at the extension cord running across the galley counter. "This is a terrible electrical fire waiting to happen. It's plugged into a breaker. The breaker that trips every hour, sometimes it lasts 2. Mason sat on the green bench. Nolan's offer was good. Nora began coiling a wet line so she would not have to look at him. "Was? He's not buying a marina without the lease. He could buy the company and make a deal with me. He doesn't make deals with people he thinks he can wait out. Is that what Cal thinks too?" Mason rubbed his stained fingertips. The blue carnation dye remained around his nails. "Dad thinks you'll last until January. And then you'll miss a lease payment or an insurance deadline. Grace will terminate, and Nolan will come back." "How comforting. He's angry, Nora. So am I. Dad built half this place with Grandpa, and then he left. He took a job because the marina couldn't support 2 households. He sent money." Nora glanced at him. "I know." Mason seemed surprised. "Vivian kept the checks," she said. "She also kept the notes where Cal told her what she was doing wrong. That sounds like both of them." It did. Cal was not a stranger descending on Vivian's life. His initials were carved beneath the workbench in the repair shed. He had installed the first fuel pump with his father and broken 2 fingers when a cable snapped. Nora remembered him grilling hamburgers on B-Dock, singing badly, slipping Vivian cash when the marina had a lean season. He had loved the place. He simply loved being recognized for loving it more than he loved the daily work. Mason stood. "You should check the assignment agreement with a lawyer. I didn't sign it. If this goes bad, Dad may offer less. If this goes bad, I may ask for more." He laughed once. "There you are." "Where?" "The version of you I remember." The comment irritated her because she wanted to ask what had happened to that version. Mason opened the door, letting in a blade of cold air. "I'll tell Haskell the boat's clear," he said. "So they can take my dock." It's the company's dock. That sentence is going to get tired. It's already exhausted. At 8 the next morning, the workers returned. Nora watched from the June bug as they separated the outer walkway, freed the anchor cables, and guided the sections toward the launch ramp. Mason's coat went with them, still looped over the rail. Cal never appeared. The boat lift came out after lunch. Its steel frame rose dripping from the water. Suspended by a truck-mounted crane, muddy water poured from the crossbeams. Ron stood beside Nora near the repair shed, hands in his pockets. 20,000 used, he said. Maybe. Cal paid 38. Cal enjoys retail. He inherited it. Then he paid nothing and still expects 38. Nora watched the lift settle onto Haskell's trailer. How do I launch stored boats without it? You don't. Ron, you asked. So I tell everyone there's no spring launch. You find somebody with a lift and pay per boat. Or customers move their boats. Or you lease a portable hoist. All bad choices. Pick the one that leaves you alive. Her phone rang before she could answer. It was the insurance broker. The marina policy would remain with Vail Marina Services until cancellation or transfer, but it no longer protected Nora as the shoreline tenant. She needed a separate premises policy immediately. Operating fuel pumps would have increased the premium. The dead pumps did not. The repair shed could be insured as storage if she agreed not to perform commercial mechanical work. The quote still made her sit down on an overturned bucket. Ron read the number upside down. Not terrible. That's 3 months of rent. Insurance companies prefer customers who own money. I have $4,800 left. Ron's face lost its humor. Total? Accessible. Don't use all of it. I need the policy by Friday, then use some of it. She looked at him. That advice cost you an entire career. It's the beard. Makes anything sound deep. The first customer called while Haskell's trailer was pulling away. Mrs. Patel had kept a 22-foot sailboat in slip C-14 for 9 summers. She had heard from Mr. Talbot that boats were being moved and wanted to know whether the marina was closing. Nora stood inside the emptied repair shed and told her the truth in careful sections. Vail Marina Services still held her storage contract. Cal controlled the stored boats and existing prepaid services. Nora controlled the site but could not promise full operations in spring. So, who do I pay for my slip? Mrs. Patel asked. No one yet. That's not how marinas work. It's how this one works today. Are you staying? Nora looked through the open shed doors at the 6 safe finger piers. The June bug sat at the closest one, its faded green stripe reflected in the water. I'm trying. Mrs. Patel was quiet. Vivian told me trying was what people said when they wanted credit before doing anything. That sounds like her. She also said you were the only person who knew why the women's shower never got hot. The mixing valve is backward. I knew it. Mrs. Patel sighed. Call me when you know what a slip costs. Don't give mine away. I won't. That isn't a reservation. I know. It's close. After the call, Nora opened the repair shed doors all the way. The empty building amplified the wind. A few bolts, dark stains, and pale rectangles marked where equipment had stood. The fixed workbenches looked lonely against the walls. Inez arrived with a thermos and 4 breakfast sandwiches wrapped in foil. I brought lunch, she said. It's 10:30. You look like it's lunch. They sat on the edge of the dock with Ron and ate. Inez proposed selling breakfast from the June bug in spring if Nora lasted that long. Ron said no one wanted eggs cooked on a boat that smelled like mildew. Inez told him his beard looked like 2 unrelated men had cut it. For 10 minutes, the marina sounded almost normal. Then Beth's sedan came down the gravel lane. She parked beside the office and opened her trunk. Inside were the rest of Nora's clothes, a floor lamp, 2 boxes of books, and the small blue quilt from the back room bed. I brought everything, Beth said. Nora wiped sandwich crumbs from her hands. You could have called. You might have told me not to. That's usually why people call. Beth lifted the quilt. Cal changed the office locks. The words came out softly as though she had been holding them in her mouth during the drive. Of course he did. He said company records are inside. My records are inside too. I know. Beth looked past Nora at the stripped repair shed, the missing lift, the empty space where the outer walkway had been. For the first time, she seemed to see not a family argument, but a place being taken apart. Is this what you wanted? She asked. Nora took the quilt from her. No, she said. It's what I chose after he made sure there wasn't anything easy left. Beth's eyes filled, but Nora had no room for tears that required her to provide comfort. She carried the quilt aboard the June bug. It smelled faintly of her mother's laundry soap. When she returned, Ron was walking along the six-finger piers, tugging every cleat. Inez had found a broom and was sweeping the repair shed. Beth stood where Nora had left her, looking uncertain and overdressed. Nora took Ron's yellow legal pad from her pocket. At the bottom of the survival list, beneath insurance and waste collection, she wrote 6 spring slips. Then she called Mrs. Patel back. Mrs. Patel did not let her finish the explanation. How much? I haven't calculated the rate. You called me. I called to say I can hold C-14. With what? Good intentions? With a written slip agreement once I update the insurance language. So, you're staying. I'm trying to tell you there are limitations. I own a sailboat. Its natural condition is limitation. Nora sat at the galley table with Ron's legal pad and her laptop. No fuel sales, no repair service, no launch lift. The parking lot and shower block stay, and the 6 rebuilt finger piers are safe. I may not have another section ready by spring. Is C-14 one of the 6? Yes. Then send me the agreement. I don't have it yet. Send it when you do. Nora heard the click of Mrs. Patel hanging up. When she stepped outside, Beth was still beside her sedan. Inez had pressed a broom into her hands. What is she doing? Nora asked. Learning the difference between standing and helping, Inez said. Beth swept leaves from the repair shed threshold with rigid, offended strokes. I know how to use a broom. You were holding it upside down. I was moving the handle. Very useful part of the broom. Ron walked past carrying a coil of discarded shore cable. Don't involve me. Nora looked at her mother. You don't have to stay. Beth swept another row of leaves into the building. Inez took the broom from her and reversed it. Out. We generally move dirt out. I was getting the corners first. Of course. Nora went back aboard before the sight of them made something loosen inside her. She spent the afternoon writing a slip agreement from Vivian's old template, removing every promise she could no longer keep. The former contract boasted 24-hour fueling, full-service repair, launch assistance, and complimentary pump-out with seasonal rental. Nora's version promised a place to tie a boat, working electrical service where marked, access to restrooms, and reasonable care of common areas. It looked less like a marina contract than a note between neighbors. At the bottom, she added a plain language warning, no fuel, mechanical, towing, or launch services are included. She sent the draft to Grace. Grace returned it 11 minutes later with 3 comments and a corrected comma. Do not write secure parking, she had noted. You cannot guarantee people won't steal catalytic converters. Nora changed it to designated parking. She emailed the agreement to Mrs. Patel before she could decide it looked embarrassing. The signed copy came back that evening with a deposit for half the spring rate and a message. Vivian's contracts were too long anyway. Nora stared at the payment notification. It was not enough for the insurance premium. It was not even close. But it was money offered for something Nora, rather than Vivian's company, could provide. She opened Ron's legal pad and wrote paid beside one of the 6 slips. By Wednesday, 3 more former customers had called. Mr. Talbot did not. His boat remained in Belford, and his anger belonged to Cal's company now. A retired dentist named Leonard Foss wanted 2 slips at a discount because he owned 2 boats. Nora told him the lake did not offer a volume rebate for taking up more water. He laughed and paid full price for one. Inez taped a piece of cardboard inside the June bug's galley window. Slips, she wrote in thick black marker. Ask Nora. That's your marketing plan? Ron asked. It has excellent conversion rates, Inez said. Everyone who sees it is already at the marina. The 5th deposit arrived Friday morning, 2 hours before the insurance deadline. Nora paid the premium. Her bank balance fell to a number that looked like a warning code. Then the broker called to say the underwriter needed photographs of every public walkway, railing, electrical pedestal, and emergency ladder before binding coverage. I sent photographs. They need current photographs after equipment removal. It's raining. They don't prohibit rain. The docks are wet. Then document that condition. Nora put on Vivian's old rubber coat and photographed the marina in 40-degree rain. She took wide shots, close-ups, and angles that showed the ladders without making the empty slips look abandoned. Ron held a tape measure beside railing heights. Inez stood out of frame and shouted unhelpful art direction. Make the puddle look hopeful. Move left. No, your other left. Can we get one where Ron doesn't look recently paroled? At the last electrical pedestal, Nora noticed a dark streak beneath the cover. She opened it and found water collecting around a cracked gasket. Ron cut power before she touched anything. How much? She asked. Don't ask that every time something breaks. How do people usually decide whether they can afford things? They swear first. He removed the cover, dried the box, and inspected the connections. The gasket cost $12. One of the receptacles did not. Nora swore. See, Ron said, now you're in the trade. Cal arrived while they were replacing it. I need the customer database, he said. Nora stayed crouched beside the pedestal. Good morning. It's nearly noon. Then you missed your chance. Ron coughed into his beard. Cal held out the envelope. Formal demand, customer names, contact information, payment history, maintenance records, and contracts belong to Vail Marina Services. Nora stood and took the envelope. I'm not withholding your records. You have a backup. I have working copies because I maintain them. I'm separating personal files and lease records. You've had 5 days. I've also had a marina dismantled around me. His gaze moved to the cardboard sign in the June bug window. Are you soliciting company customers? I'm renting slips. To people you contacted through our database. Mrs. Patel contacted me after Mr. Talbot called her. Leonard saw the sign. Foss rented here for 6 years. He is also capable of recognizing a piece of cardboard. Cal's mouth tightened. You cannot trade under the Vail name. I'm not. You're operating at Vail Marina. That's the name on your office and old contracts. My agreement says Nora Vail, shoreline tenant. You're using our goodwill. Is there a meter for that, or are you taking it on the next truck? Ron turned away, shoulders moving once beneath his jacket. Cal looked at him. I heard you'd come out of retirement. I didn't. Retirement came out of me. You should be careful about performing work here. The company's insurance no longer covers the site. My insurance does, Nora said. He looked back at her. Already? She refused to show how much his surprise pleased her. Bound this morning, and rent, current, for now. He walked toward the June bug and read the sign through the window. How many slips? That's none of your business. So 5. Nora glanced at Ron. Ron shrugged. It was a lucky guess. Cal turned. 5 deposits won't carry this place through winter. Neither will selling storage racks at half their cost. For the first time, his composure cracked. Only slightly, but enough. The racks are in use, with boats whose owners expected them here. The contracts permit relocation. That doesn't make it smart. Cal stepped closer. Do you think I wanted to move them? Nolan's company would have honored every contract. They would have invested enough to fix what Mom let deteriorate, what Vivian couldn't afford to fix. She could have called me. She did. The words stopped him. Nora remembered Cal's checks, the notes attached to them, the way Vivian would put them unopened beneath the fruit bowl until Nora made her deposit them. She called when CDOC failed inspection, Nora said. You told her to shut half of it down, because replacing it was a bad investment under an expiring lease. She asked you to guarantee the repairs so Grace would renew. Grace's terms were unreasonable. Then you knew. I knew the old agreement was in negotiation. You knew enough to say no. Cal's face changed, not guilt exactly. Recognition that they had reached the part of the story he preferred to phrase differently. Mom made poor decisions near the end, he said. She asked for help. I offered a sale. Of course you did. He pointed toward the office. That building is company property. The building is a permanent improvement under Grace's lease. The contents are ours, and it is not included in your operating area until the asset separation is completed. You changed the locks on my records. I secured company property. Give me access. Send a written list of what you believe is yours. Nora looked at the padded envelope in her hand. You came all the way here to tell me to write you a letter? I came to see whether discomfort had improved your judgment. His eyes went to the June bug. The curtains were open now. Beth's blue quilt lay folded over the forward berth. The orange heater glowed through the window. Nora understood what he saw. A boat that smelled of mildew, a crude sign, an emptied repair shed, and 5 safe slips facing an entire winter. She almost saw it his way. Then the 6th payment notification sounded on her phone. Cal's gaze dropped toward the screen. Nora read the name. Ellen Ruiz, slip C-9, 6 out of 6. She locked the phone without smiling. Anything else? She asked. Cal tucked his clipboard under his arm. When this fails, the offer won't be the same. I assumed punishment had a depreciation schedule. He left without saying goodbye. The first frost hardened the docks white the following morning. Nora woke because the heater was silent. The cabin felt refrigerated. Her breath clouded above Beth's quilt, and a thin skin of ice had formed inside the galley window. She pulled on both sweaters from the cardboard box and checked the breaker. It had not tripped. The shore cord was dead. Outside, Ron was already at the pedestal, kneeling beside an open panel with a flashlight between his teeth. He removed it when he saw her. Main connector overheated. Can it be fixed? Yes. How much? He gave her a look. Nora swore first. Better, he said. The connector had fused inside the old shore cord. Ron could replace the end, but the cord itself was brittle. A safe new one cost nearly $300. Nora checked her account even though she knew the number. I can lend you one, Ron said. No, it's a cord, not a kidney. I can't build this by borrowing everything. You can't build it while frozen either. She stood on the dock in 2 sweaters, Vivian's rubber coat, and slippers because she had come outside too quickly. Grace approached carrying a thermos. I can see why customers are drawn to the professionalism, she said. Nora looked down at her slippers. Emergency footwear. Grace handed her the thermos. Coffee, your rent check cleared. Were you worried? Yes. The honesty stung less than reassurance would have. Grace inspected the dead cord, then the June bug. Your lease requires habitable live-aboard electrical if you intend to reside on site. I know. It does not require you to prove self-sufficiency by rejecting available equipment. Ron pointed at Grace. Reasonable woman, don't get attached. Nora accepted the borrowed cord. Warmth returned to the cabin slowly. Pipes clicked. Ice softened on the inside of the window and ran down the glass, soaking the cardboard sign. Black ink bled through the word Nora until her name became a dark blur. Beth came that afternoon with cleaning gloves and a bucket. I'm not here to move you, she said before Nora could speak. Then why are you here? Beth looked around the cabin. Because the walls are growing things. They stripped the wet cardboard from the window and scrubbed mildew from the galley paneling. Beth worked in silence, sleeves rolled to her elbows, removing dirt from corners Nora had stopped seeing. Near dusk, she touched the plywood cover over the empty engine compartment. Your grandmother cried when they took it out, she said. She cried after they left. She called me before. Nora stopped scrubbing. Beth kept her eyes on the plywood. I told her an engine was a luxury when she owed taxes. That was practical. I was always practical with her. Beth's mouth moved as if the words tasted bitter. It was a good way to avoid being useful. Nora rinsed her sponge. An apology hovered in the cold cabin, incomplete and unwanted in the form available. She did not reach for it. Beth knelt beside the empty compartment and began scrubbing the grease marks around the mounting holes. After a moment, Nora knelt across from her. They worked until the last daylight left the windows and the houseboat, still unable to move itself, smelled less like something abandoned. Beth found a dead mouse behind the galley bench and screamed so sharply that Ron came running with a boat hook. He stopped in the doorway. What happened? Beth stood on the bench, one gloved hand over her mouth. There! Ron peered beneath the table. That mouse has been dead since Clinton. I don't care who was president. Nora began laughing. She had not meant to. The sound rose out of her until she had to sit on the floor beside the empty engine compartment. Beth glared down at her. This isn't funny. You should have seen your face. I inhaled mold for you. And I appreciate it. You have a terrible way of showing appreciation. Ron collected the mouse with the boat hook and dropped it into the cleaning bucket. Beth made another sound. Bucket's ruined, he announced. Could never hold water again. By the time Beth left, the cabinet doors stood open to dry. The green benches had been scrubbed, and the dead mouse had received what Ron called a private lakeside service near the dumpster. Beth paused at the end of the finger pier, with her purse over one shoulder. I'm having dinner Sunday, she said. You're invited. Who else? Cal and Mason. Nora coiled the borrowed shore cord. Then I'm not. It's still my house. That's why I'm telling you before Sunday. Beth looked toward the boat. I wish you'd stop making me choose. Nora's hands went still. I didn't make the will. I didn't bring a buyer before Vivian died. I didn't remove the docs. I know. Then who is making you choose? Beth's eyes filled with exhausted anger. Everything is very clear when you're the one who's been wronged. Nora flinched. Beth saw it and closed her eyes. I didn't mean that. You did. I meant there are consequences no matter what I do. Yes, Nora said. That's what choosing is. Beth walked away without answering. The lake began freezing at the edges 2 nights later. Thin ice formed around the pilings and cracked whenever the June bug moved. Nora slept in leggings, socks, 2 shirts, and the blue quilt pulled over her head. The repaired shore connection held. The little heater did not warm the whole cabin, but it created one livable corner, and Nora learned to move that corner with her, beside the galley table while she worked, near the berth while she slept, outside the bathroom door while she showered quickly enough to qualify as a medical event. The boat changed by inches. She tore out the swollen panel beneath the leaking window. Ron showed her how to cut replacement plywood without splintering the veneer. Inez brought leftover cream paint from the cafe and declared it almost marine grade if no one asks a marine. Grace rejected that claim and gave Nora a half can of actual sealant. The empty engine compartment became storage. Nora built a shallow frame over the mounting points, added a hinge top, and arranged her lease copies, insurance binder, slip agreements, and Ron's yellow legal pad inside watertight boxes. You made a filing cabinet out of where the horsepower went, Inez said. It's quieter, less fun at intersections. By December, the June bug smelled of paint, coffee, and damp wool instead of rot. Nora's 6 slip deposits remained untouched, except for insurance and materials specifically needed to make the slips usable. To pay rent and eat, she resumed doing books for Inez and the repair shops at night. The cafe's December receipts were a battlefield of flower invoices, cash tips, and Inez's habit of writing business expenses on napkins. A napkin reading Tony, 86, appeared between coffee receipts. Who is Tony, and why did you pay him $86? I didn't. That's his phone number. It's 2 digits. I was going to remember the rest. You did not. Then Tony has been set free. Nora laughed, entered the actual expenses, and billed Inez 5 hours. The payment covered groceries and half the electric bill. Cal's company sent holiday cards to every marina customer. Vail Marina Services wishes you smooth sailing in the new year. Nora received one because her address remained in the database. She set it beside the heater and watched the gold sailboat curl from the heat. Mason came to the June bug 3 days before Christmas carrying a small artificial tree in a paper bag. I'm not celebrating, Nora said. I didn't ask. You brought a tree. It was in Grandma's office. Dad told me to clear the last personal items. He placed the tree on the galley counter. Its plastic branches had been flattened into one side, and a wooden speedboat hung from the top in place of a star. The paper bag contained Vivian's cinnamon gum, the empty hook mug, and the brass letter opener. Nora picked up the opener. Cal said this was office equipment. Mom said it was Grandpa's. Mom was right. Don't tell Dad. We're limiting surprises. Mason did not remove his coat. He had lost weight since October, enough that his shirt collar looked slightly too large. Nora hung the mug on the empty hook. Where's Vivian's chair? My garage. Dad wants to sell it. For how much? He thinks it's antique. It's from Staples. I know. Mason ran his thumb along the cream-painted panel. This looks better. Disappointed? I wasn't rooting for black mold, just January. He leaned against the galley. We've got a problem. We, Vail Marina Services. Then no. You don't even know what it is. Does it involve work I'm expected to perform because I used to do it for free? His silence answered. Nora opened the paper bag and took a piece of gum. Mason sat on the bench. The Belford warehouse needs the boats out by April 1st. Dad rented it through March because Nolan's deal was supposed to close. There's no lift here. I'm aware. You sold it? No offers. Haskell has it in storage, charging us by the month. Nora chewed slowly. You inherited a storage company that pays to store its own storage equipment. I did not write the sentence, Nora. Vivian would love that sentence. His mouth twitched, then flattened. We need to schedule launches at Hadley Marine or find another yard. 41 boats, different owner instructions, spring service requests, trailer requirements. The files are a mess. The files are organized. Then our understanding of the files is a mess. Better? Can you help? Nora looked at him. There was no polished property smile, no joking invitation to surrender her dignity. He looked tired and embarrassed, which made refusing harder than anger would have. What are you offering? A chance to prevent customers from being furious. They're your customers. They were grandma's. And that phrase is supposed to make them my responsibility. No, it's supposed to make you care. I do care. That's why this works on me. Mason looked down at his hands. Nora continued, you and Cal own the contracts and the money. I own no lift and no repair equipment. If I coordinate 41 launches, you pay me. I assume that. No, you didn't. Otherwise, you would have started with the rate. He blew out a breath. Fine. Give me a rate. $35 an hour. Jesus, my bookkeeping rate is 40. You're charging family? You charge me for 6 months of housing in exchange for my lease. That was Dad's offer. You stood beside him. He rubbed his palms over his knees. 25, 35, 30, capped at 40 hours. 40 boats in 40 hours. 41. 41 boats in 40 hours? You enjoy saying no. I'm learning. They settled on $30 an hour with no cap, written instructions from Cal, and no use of Nora's lease or docs without a separate agreement. Mason typed the terms into his phone and emailed them before he left. At the doorway, he glanced at the little tree. Are you coming Sunday? To Mom's? She invited me. She invited Cal. He said no. Nora did not ask why. Mason stepped onto the dock. For what it's worth, he hasn't spoken to me much since I turned the truck around. That makes no sense. You still removed everything. Anger isn't accounting. It doesn't have to balance. He walked away before she could answer. The launch project began with a spreadsheet and immediately became phone calls. Owners wanted batteries charged, hulls cleaned, motors serviced, trailers inspected, covers stored, and launch dates scheduled around vacations they had not yet planned. One insisted his boat could only be moved on a Tuesday because it disliked Mondays. Nora asked whether the boat had said so personally. He has a temperament, the man replied. Hadley Marine agreed to a bulk launch rate if Vail Marina Services delivered the boats ready and provided 2 workers. Ron refused to count as one, because Cal had once described him as a retired hobbyist during a dispute over a fuel filter. I have standards, Ron said. You repaired my electrical pedestal for coffee. Different standards. Mason became one of the workers. He learned to remove winter covers, check drain plugs, and read Vivian's maintenance codes. On the 3rd day at Belford, he opened a file marked PR and asked why it contained a photograph of a cracked toilet seat. Plumbing repair, Nora said. I thought it meant public relations. At this marina, same thing. They worked without discussing Cal, the lease, or Sunday dinners. Sometimes that felt like peace. Sometimes it felt like a hallway they were both afraid to leave. In February, a windstorm tore 2 shrink-wrap covers and snapped an anchor line on the unused end of Sea Dock. Nora woke to the June bug jerking against its spring line. She pulled on boots and ran outside. Freezing rain struck her face. One of the 6 finger piers bucked hard enough to lift from the water. Ron's truck appeared before she called him. How did you know? She shouted. I own windows. They worked by headlamp, tightening lines and shifting load from the damaged anchor. Grace came down in rubber boots over her starry bathrobe and held the light. Inez arrived with coffee at 4 in the morning, having received no invitation and apparently required none. By dawn, the safe section held. Nora stood in the repair shed, soaked through, hands shaking around a paper cup. The June bug glowed at the dock. The 6 finger piers remained aligned, gray and solid beneath the clearing sky. Grace studied the broken line coiled on the floor. You need a full anchor inspection before spring, she said. Nora almost laughed. Good morning to you too. I'm not congratulating you for surviving equipment failure. You could try once. Grace considered it. You tied the load lines correctly. Warmth moved through Nora that had nothing to do with coffee. Then Grace added, eventually. The launch work paid Nora enough to replace Ron's borrowed shore cord, order the anchor inspection, and keep rent current. It also forced Cal to communicate with her through short, formal emails. He approved expenses without greeting her. She sent weekly hours without signing her name. When the first warm afternoon softened the ice around the pilings, Mason brought the office key. Asset separation is finished, he said. Nora turned the key over in her palm. The same red plastic tag Vivian had used still hung from the ring. Inside, the office had been stripped nearly bare. The computer, filing cabinets, refrigerator, maps, coffee maker, and secondhand furniture were gone. Pale squares marked the walls. The anchor-shaped flowers had died in their foam and been left on the windowsill. Nora carried them to the dumpster. She stood behind the empty counter, listening to her footsteps echo. For years, she had imagined the office as the center of the marina. Now, it felt like a room someone else had already finished leaving. Mason waited in the doorway. "You can use it." "I know. Dad says the building is still disputed. Grace says it isn't. I'm telling you what he says." Nora looked through the window at the June bug. Its cream galley walls caught the afternoon light. The cardboard sign was gone, replaced by a small painted board Inez had mounted beside the door. "Slips?" asked Nora. She placed the office key in her pocket. Then she turned off the light and locked the door behind them. The office stayed locked. Nora used its covered porch for parcel deliveries and kept everything important aboard the June bug. She installed a narrow shelf above the galley table, added a second-hand printer, and put Vivian's mug back to work holding pens. The empty engine compartment swallowed contracts, spare keys, emergency flares, and enough tax receipts to make the boat ride lower at the stern. People began knocking on the cabin door instead of looking for someone in the office. At first, Nora found it embarrassing. Then Mrs. Patel arrived in March to inspect C-14 and stepped aboard without waiting to be invited. "This is better," she said. "The office has more space. The office had your grandmother in it, which meant no one else was allowed to finish a sentence." "That's true." Mrs. Patel sat at the galley table, accepted coffee, and spent 20 minutes explaining why her slip required one additional cleat. Ron listened from the bench and said the existing cleats could restrain a Navy destroyer. "My boat has opinions," Mrs. Patel replied. "That's spreading." Nora installed the cleat. The first of the stored boats launched at Hadley under a pale sky with ice still hiding in the shadows. Mason arrived at 6 in the morning, wearing work boots that had never seen work. By noon, they were brown with mud, and he had learned that drain plugs were small enough to lose but important enough to ruin the day. Cal came only once. He remained beside his truck while Nora guided a cruiser onto a trailer, and Mason checked the owner's launch sheet. "You're behind schedule," Cal said. "We're 20 minutes ahead," Mason answered. "The Belford manager says there are still 14 boats. There are supposed to be 14. Cal looked toward Nora. "Hadley is charging for extra handling. One owner requested a battery replacement after delivery. Was it authorized? In writing? By whom? The man who owns the boat." Mason hid a smile by bending over the trailer coupling. Cal left without speaking to him. The launch work taught Nora how much of the marina's old income had rested on unpaid favors. Vivian kept rates low by promising that Ron could take a quick look at engines, that Nora could fit one more launch between appointments, that a storage delay was no trouble. Every individual kindness was small. Together, they had consumed whole weeks no invoice acknowledged. Nora charged Vail Marina Services for every hour. Mason approved the timesheets. By April, Cal's company had delivered 27 boats to Hadley and 11 directly to their owners. 3 remained in Belford because their owners disputed service charges. Only 4 returned to the Vail Inlet, and all 4 belonged to Nora's 6 slip holders. Mrs. Patel's sailboat came first. It entered under its own power, white hull cutting the green-brown water, while Mrs. Patel stood at the tiller in an orange life vest. Nora waited on C-14 with a bowline. Ron stood behind her, pretending he had come only to check a breaker. Mrs. Patel approached too fast. "Reverse!" Ron called. "I am in reverse." "Then tell the boat." The sailboat bumped the fender, rebounded, and settled beside the finger pier. Nora caught the line and secured it. Mrs. Patel stepped onto the dock. "Perfect." Ron looked at the black mark on the fender. For certain definitions. Inez rang the little wooden speedboat ornament from the artificial tree as though it were a bell. It made no sound, so she shouted, "Ding!" The 5 of them drank coffee aboard the June bug. Mrs. Patel brought almond cookies. Grace arrived halfway through, inspected the new cleat without comment, and ate 3. Nora had pictured reopening day as something formal. A sign, perhaps, fresh paint on every railing. Instead, it was 6 adults crowded around a galley table, while wet gloves steamed beside the heater. It felt better than formal. The remaining slips filled over the next 2 weeks. Leonard Foss brought his fishing boat and asked whether the cardboard sign had been retired for artistic reasons. Ellen Ruiz arrived with a small cabin cruiser and a toolbox larger than Nora's. Ron began spending mornings at the fixed workbench, insisting he was only maintaining his personal hand tools. Inez supplied breakfast sandwiches on consignment. Nora stored them in a compact refrigerator beneath the galley counter and sold them with coffee to slip holders. The first morning produced $9 in profit and one complaint that the egg was too round. "Scale," Inez said. "Soon we can disappoint dozens." The marina remained visibly wounded. Empty water stretched where dock sections had been. Pale rectangles marked missing equipment in the repair shed. The silent fuel dispensers stood beneath their canopy like two men refusing to speak. Cal arrived with Mason on a warm afternoon, carrying a proposal. Nora read it at the Junebug's galley table, while Cal stood rather than sit. He offered to lease her 12 dock fingers, the control cabinet, fuel dispensers, and boat lift for a monthly price higher than her shoreline rent. "Does this include delivery?" she asked. "No." "Installation?" "No." "Inspection?" "Those are operating costs." "Storage charges until installation?" Cal's mouth tightened. "Negotiable." Nora slid the proposal back. Mason remained near the door. "You could make a counter. The lift alone needs a crane. The fuel system needs inspection after being disconnected. 12 dock fingers require anchors, hardware, and electrical service. That's why the equipment is valuable," Cal said. "It's valuable as a functioning system. You're offering me a pile of parts at functioning system prices. They were functioning before you refused the assignment. They were functioning before you removed them." Cal put the proposal into his leather portfolio. "How long do you think 6 slips will support the lease?" "They won't." He seemed pleased that she admitted it. "I'm adding winter storage on land near the repair shed," Nora said. Grace approved the area. Ron found used stands. Inez wants to operate a weekend breakfast counter, out of a houseboat. People like the houseboat. People like novelty. They liked your grandmother. Neither is a business plan. Nora looked at Mason. "Do you agree?" He took too long. "I think you need more slips," he said. "I do. Not at this price." Cal closed the portfolio. "The offer expires Friday. Then you'll have more room in the portfolio." After they left, Nora found Mason waiting near the parking lot. "He's paying Haskell every month," he said. "For storage?" Mason nodded. "No one wants a mismatched section of 30-year-old marina infrastructure. Nolan made an offer, but Dad thought it was insulting." "Was it?" "Yes." "It may also have been accurate." Nora leaned against the repair shed door. "Why tell me?" "Because you're both trying to prove the other one can't survive. I'm trying to pay rent. And he's trying to preserve the value of what Grandma left us, by storing it until it rusts." Mason rubbed the toe of one boot against the gravel. They no longer looked new. "I'll tell him you want a lower price. I want terms that reflect what the equipment is worth separated, and what it will cost to make useful." That sounds like something he could hear. "Then you say it." Mason looked toward Cal's truck. "You're his business partner," Nora said. "On paper." "So am I, apparently, whenever a boat needs a drain plug." He laughed, but there was no comfort in it. Cal's offer expired without a counter. The Friday after that, every safe slip held a boat. Nora painted the Junebug's faded green stripe a deep forest color. Beth helped with the trim, moving slowly around the cabin roof in old jeans Nora had never seen before. "You own jeans," Nora said. "I garden. You have landscapers. I supervise gardening." Beth smiled. Nora did not, but the corner of her mouth betrayed her. They still had not discussed the dinner Nora refused or Cal's accusation in the office. Beth came on Wednesdays, brought food Nora had not requested, and completed one practical task. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes Nora handed her sandpaper and let the scrape of it fill the space between them. Memorial Day weekend arrived hot enough to turn the cabin roof into a griddle. Inez set up a folding table beside the Junebug with coffee, breakfast sandwiches, and a handwritten sign promising lake-fresh muffins, which Ron called geographically dishonest. Boaters came down to check lines, wash decks, and ask whether fuel service would return. People who had moved to other marinas stopped by out of curiosity. Nora sold day parking and let visitors use the public launch lane under the terms of Grace's lease. By 10 Saturday morning, the 6-slip marina felt crowded. At 10:12, Ellen Ruiz entered the Junebug, holding a roll of toilet paper. "The women's restroom is making a noise." "What kind?" the kind that says don't flush again. Nora ran to the shower block. The floor drain had backed up. Gray water spread across the tile, carrying a sandal someone had left beneath a bench. Each time a toilet flushed, the drain burped. She closed both restrooms, taped signs across the doors, and called the waste service emergency number. Holiday rate, the dispatcher warned. How holiday? Double. How emergency? 3-hour arrival window. Nora approved it. Grace appeared while Ron was opening the exterior cleanout. She took one look at the water beneath the restroom door. Main line, she said. Could be a blockage. Main line. Can you be pessimistic after we inspect? I own the pipe. That made 2 of them crouching over a lease copy, while adults in bathing suits asked where they were supposed to go to the bathroom. The shower block was a permanent improvement. Maintenance belonged to Nora. Ron fed a rented inspection camera into the cleanout. The image showed cloudy water, then darkness, then a section of pipe crushed beneath the access road. Grace was right. Nora sat back on her heels. How does a pipe under a road crush today? It didn't, Ron said. It finished today. The waste service truck arrived, pumped the line, and confirmed the restrooms could not reopen until the damaged section was excavated. The driver gave Nora a temporary service estimate that made the insurance premium look friendly. Inez moved the breakfast table away from the smell. People began leaving. Mrs. Patel came up from C-Dock, took in Nora's face, and asked, "How bad? No restrooms for the weekend. Portable toilets? Not until tomorrow morning. Refunds?" Nora looked at the day-use receipts in her pocket. Yes. She spent the next hour returning money. A man who had used the launch lane twice demanded his coffee refunded too. Inez did it before Nora could answer. At 3, Cal's truck came down the lane. He had probably heard from Mason, or Beth, or one of the customers. Nora no longer cared which. Cal stepped out and surveyed the closed restroom signs, the departing vehicles, and the waste truck beside the shower block. "You need excavation equipment," he said. "I know. I can have a crew here Tuesday. For how much?" His face tightened. "Not everything is an attack." "Then give me the number." He named one. It was lower than the emergency contractor's quote, and still more money than Nora had available. Cal looked toward the busy 6 slips. "Assign the lease, and the company covers it." There it was, not help. A price. Nora wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist. The marina smelled like sewage, hot asphalt, and Inez's cinnamon muffins. "No. You're going to close over pride? I'm going to fix a pipe." "With what money?" She did not answer. Cal looked almost sorrowful. "This is what I was trying to prevent." "No. This is what you were waiting for." Behind him, Beth's sedan turned into the lot. She parked beside the waste truck, opened the trunk, and removed 2 folding chairs and a handwritten sign. "Restrooms," it read, with an arrow pointing up the footpath toward her inland house. Beth carried it toward the entrance. Cal stared at his sister. "What are you doing?" "My house is 6 minutes away on foot." "You're inviting strangers into it?" "I'm letting Nora's customers use a bathroom." Beth planted the sign beside the path, pressed both hands onto the wooden stake, and looked at Cal. "It's practical," she said. Cal looked at Beth as if she had spoken in a language he had not known she understood. "You can't be serious. I have 3 bathrooms. That's not the point. It's exactly the point. Hers don't work. Mine do." A couple from the launch lane stood near the sign, pretending not to listen. Beth smiled at them with the brittle courtesy she used for insurance agents. "Follow the path," she said. "The side door will be open." They thanked her and hurried uphill. Cal lowered his voice. "You're undermining me in public." Beth brushed dirt from her hands. "I put up a bathroom sign. You know what this looks like?" Nora expected Beth to apologize. It was the shape every exchange between them had taken for years. Cal defining the stakes, Beth reducing herself until peace could fit over her. Instead, Beth looked around at the waste truck, the closed shower block, and Nora's full slips. "It looks like she needs help," she said. Cal gave Nora a long stare. Then he got into his truck and drove away. Beth watched until the truck disappeared. Her shoulders dropped. "I should go unlock the side door," she said. "You don't have to do this." "I know. People are going to track lake mud through your house." "I know. Leonard drinks a lot of coffee." Beth's mouth twitched. "I'll hide the good towels." The path to her house became the marina's least dignified amenity. Inez added toilet trail to the sign. Ron drew an arrow that looked like a bent fish. For the next 2 hours, adults carrying towels and apologetic expressions climbed the hill, while Beth stood at her side door directing traffic. At 5, thunder rolled over the western point. Nora checked every line as wind pushed dark water into the inlet. Boat owners secured loose covers and carried chairs off the docks. Inez packed her folding table. Ron went home to close his workshop windows, promising to return if the storm worsened. Beth came down the path with the restroom sign under one arm. "I locked up," she called. The rain arrived before she reached the June bug. One hard gust struck broadside. The boat surged away from the finger pier, snapped back, and jerked its forward spring line against the cleat. Nora heard the rope strain. "Get aboard!" she shouted. Beth climbed onto the dock instead. "What do I do?" "Hold that rail. I can help." "Then take the spare line from the locker." Beth found it and passed one end to Nora without tangling it. Rain flattened her hair against her face. Nora fed the line through the bow cleat and pointed toward the next piling. "Wrap it once. Don't tie yet." Beth moved with surprising certainty. She took the line around the piling, leaned back, and held tension while Nora adjusted the existing spring. "You've done this before," Nora said. "Your grandfather taught me." Beth's shoes slipped. She recovered without releasing the rope. Together they shortened the line and pulled the June bug away from the dock edge. The hull settled between its fenders. Lightning flashed over the lake. Nora dragged Beth inside. Water ran from their clothes onto the newly painted floor. The cabin roof hammered under the rain. Wind pressed against the walls, and the June bug leaned, lines creaking. Beth stood at the window, breathing hard. "You never told me you knew dock lines. You never asked." The words escaped before either of them could soften them. Nora peeled off her wet sweatshirt. "I guess it runs in the family." Beth laughed once, then covered her face. Nora stopped. "I'm sorry," Beth said through her hands. "I'm so tired of finding out who I became. You don't have to do this right now. When should I? Between strangers using my downstairs bathroom?" The power flickered. The heater went dark, returned, and glowed orange. Beth lowered her hands. Her mascara had left gray shadows beneath her eyes. "I took the house because I was afraid," she said. "Not because I wanted more than you. You got more than me. I know. Everyone keeps explaining motives like they changed the result. I know." The rain made conversation feel private, sealing the windows and moving water. Beth sat on the green bench. "After your father died, I had the insurance money, and I made every wrong decision slowly enough to call it careful. Cal helped with the mortgage. He helped when I needed the roof replaced. Whenever I disagreed with him, I could feel every favor sitting in the room." Nora had known Cal helped. She had not known her mother kept count. "So you let him count for you," she said. "Yes. With Vivian, too?" Beth stared at the floor. "Vivian trusted you with work. She trusted me with worry. I thought if I kept everybody calm, that was a contribution. You watched him hand me a broken boat. I thought you'd stay with me. So it didn't matter what I got." Beth's mouth trembled. "I told myself you didn't care about things. I care about being seen. I see that now. No, you see the Marina Lease. You see customers. You see me making something Cal wants. That's fair." The lack of defense left Nora with nowhere to push. Beth wiped rain from her face. "I was ashamed you left school, not because I thought you were lazy, because I bragged so much when you started. Then you came home, and I didn't know how to explain it without feeling like I had failed. I wasn't yours to explain. I know that now, too." The June bug pulled hard against the new line. It held. Beth looked toward the plywood cover over the empty engine compartment. "I told Vivian to sell the engine. I told myself it was the only sensible option, then let you handle the sale because I couldn't listen to her cry." Nora sat across from her. "Fear explains abandonment," she said. "It doesn't make it feel less like abandonment." Beth closed her eyes. "I understand." "No, you don't get to say that yet." "All right." They stayed in the cabin while the storm moved over them. Beth did not ask for forgiveness. Nora did not offer it. When the rain softened, they checked the lines together. The portable toilets arrived at 7 the next morning. The emergency rental consumed nearly all the day-use income, but the marina reopened. Inez sold coffee beside 2 green plastic units with a sign that read, "Breakfast this way. Everything else that way." Mrs. Patel declined Nora's refund. "So did Ellen," she said. The restrooms were closed half the day. I used Beth's. That is not the service you paid for. Then credit it to winter storage. I haven't finalized winter storage. Finalize mine. Leonard wanted the same. By noon, 4 slip holders had signed commitments to store boats on the land beside the repair shed, provided Nora secured stands and shrink-wrap service. Their deposits covered the excavation, down payment, but created 4 more promises she had to keep. Inez watched Nora enter the payments aboard the Junebug. You look sick. I'm spending winter money in May. You're repairing the reason they trust you to store anything here. If something else breaks, something else will break. That's not comforting. I'm not Grace. The excavation crew came Tuesday. They cut through the access road, exposed the crushed line, and replaced 11 feet of pipe. Ron stood over the trench making observations nobody had requested. Grace photographed the repair, the bedding material, and every joint before allowing the trench to close. Beth brought sandwiches for the crew. Cal did not return. When the restrooms flushed properly, Nora stood in the women's room and listened to the tank refill. The sound was absurdly beautiful. The bill went onto her credit card after the deposits ran short. She reopened the shower block and repainted the access road patch herself. Mason came Friday evening with 2 paper cups of coffee and a folder. I brought you one, he said. Nora accepted it. Personal growth. They sat on the Junebug's stern deck. The inlet reflected a pink evening sky. Every safe slip was occupied. Mason opened the folder. Haskell raised the storage rate. Not my problem. No offers on the lift or dock fingers. 2 on the fuel equipment, both low. Dad rejected them. Still not my problem. Nolan withdrew completely. Nora drank her coffee. Mason handed her a sheet listing the equipment, storage charges, insurance, company debts, prepaid service obligations, and estimated resale values. The company was not insolvent, but it was bleeding from a dozen small cuts. Why are you showing me this? Because Dad won't. What do you want? A deal that stops us from paying to store equipment you need while you pay to work around not having it. That sounds suspiciously reasonable. I'm exhausted. Nora read the figures again. These resale estimates are high. They're Dad's. The lift needs inspection. The dock sections need new hardware. The fuel controls aren't worth anything to me until I can afford to operate fuel, make an offer. With what? Installments, seasonal revenue, whatever businesses do when they lack money and still insist on existing. Nora looked at him. Would Cal accept that? No. Then why are we talking? Because the company belongs to both of us. On paper? His face tightened. I'm trying to change what that means. Nora closed the folder. I won't negotiate through you. I know. No more messages. No more offers that expire on Friday. I know. And if Cal comes here to tell me Vivian wanted him to own everything, the meeting ends. Mason nodded. Bring actual values, she said. Not the numbers he wishes were true. A little of his old smile returned. Anything else? Yes. Tell him the meeting happens here. Mason looked around the restored cabin. On the boat? He wanted the lease. He can come see where I keep it. Cal arrived Monday morning. He stepped aboard the Junebug for the first time since Vivian's death, looked at the cream walls, the forest green trim, the customer keys hanging beside the galley, and the hinge cover Nora had built over the absent engine. He sat across from her at the table. Nora placed Ron's legal pad between them. Let's separate what your equipment was worth inside Vivian's marina, she said, from what it's worth now. Cal looked down at the legal pad, but did not touch it. You're using handwritten numbers? They're estimates, on paper from an auto parts store. Ron gave it to me. That explains the professionalism. Nora opened Mason's folder. The lift cost $38,000 new. It is 7 years old, has been removed, transported, stored outdoors, and hasn't passed an operating inspection since removal. It worked perfectly. When it was installed, it can be reinstalled for $8,600, assuming the footings are usable. Cal glanced at Mason. Where did that number come from? Haskell and 2 crane operators. You called Haskell without authorization? I asked for a quote. Cal's attention returned to Nora. Continue. The 12 dock fingers need new hinge hardware, several deck boards, and electrical work. The control cabinet is useful, but I'm not buying the fuel dispensers or taking responsibility for the underground system yet. You can't cherry-pick the assets? I can choose what I offer to buy. You need fuel service. I need toilets too. Those came first. A flicker crossed his face. He had heard about Beth's sign. Nora placed her written offer in front of him. She had spent most of Sunday adjusting numbers until each one hurt for a different reason. I'll buy the lift, 12 dock fingers, control cabinet, portable compressor, service jacks, and the spare parts drawers. The screws you told me to take. I've matured. Mason leaned forward to read the total. Cal did not. That's less than Nolan offered for the lift and docks alone. Nolan's offer included fuel equipment. It was still higher. Then sell to Nolan. He withdrew. Then it isn't an offer. Cal sat back. The green vinyl creaked beneath him. Nora continued. 10% down after inspection and delivery. The remainder over 3 years, quarterly. Interest at 5%. Mason has copies of my slip commitments and winter storage agreements. Commitments are not collateral. They're evidence of revenue. They're promises. So is an installment agreement. Cal laughed softly. You've spent too much time with Grace. Not possible, Grace called through the open window from the dock. Cal turned. Are we holding this meeting publicly? You're on a houseboat with the windows open, Grace said. That generally reduces privacy. She continued toward the shower block without slowing. Mason pressed his lips together. Cal finally picked up the offer. He read every line, making no sound except once when he reached the price assigned to the dock fingers. This is insulting. It reflects removal, storage, transport back, and repair. You're deducting the consequences of your own refusal. I didn't remove them. You made them unusable to the company. The expiring lease did that. 18 months before Vivian died. He put the paper down. Your grandmother intended Mason and me to operate the marina. Then why didn't she leave either of you the lease? Because you interfered. Mason looked at the floor. Nora's pulse rose, but she kept her voice level. Grace testified to nothing. There was no case. I showed up at her kitchen with receipts and a repair schedule, while Mom was ill. Yes, she was ill. The marina still had bills. You should have come to me. She did, for money. She always came to me for money after ignoring every piece of advice I gave her. You sent checks with instructions. I had a family and a career. I couldn't keep driving out here every time a pipe clogged, so you offered to sell the place. I offered to protect it. From what? From exactly this. Cal gestured around the June bug. 6 slips, breakfast sandwiches, sewage on a holiday weekend, and you living inside a boat that should have been scrapped. The words filled the cabin. Outside, someone laughed near Sea Dock. A wrench clinked against the fixed workbench in the shed. Nora placed her palm over the plywood engine cover. Then sell me the equipment, she said. You'll be protected. Cal closed the folder. No. Mason's head lifted. Dad, no installment sale, no undersecured loan based on friendly customers who can cancel. The company is paying Haskell $1,900 a month, Mason said. That is temporary. It's been 7 months. We will find a buyer. We had one. You rejected it. The offer was predatory. It was close to this one. Cal stood. Then you've both lost perspective. He stepped toward the door. Mason remained seated. Cal noticed. Are you coming? I own half the company. You own shares. That does not give you authority to dispose of assets by yourself. It gives me the right to say we need a plan. We have one. Waiting for Nora to fail isn't a plan. Cal's face went still. Mason continued before courage could abandon him. She didn't steal the marina. We inherited equipment and contracts. We thought those were the business because Grandma's will said business. She let us think the shore lease transferred. No. We didn't ask. I asked. You told Grace her terms were unreasonable and assumed she'd come back when Grandma got worse. Cal looked toward Nora as though she had supplied Mason with the sentence. Mason stood. I'll accept the offer for my interest, subject to the company documents. Installments are fine. You don't know what you're doing. That may be hereditary. Cal left without him. The boat rocked once beneath the force of the door closing. Mason picked up his coffee. It had gone cold. That went well, he said. Nora watched Cal cross the parking lot. Does he have to approve the sale? Of company assets, yes. I can't sell half a dock finger. You said you'd accept. I do. It matters. Not to Haskell. No. He stared into the cup. When I was 12, Dad brought me here during a storm. Grandpa had fallen off a ladder, and Grandma wouldn't close the fuel dock. Dad worked 30 hours without sleeping. He repaired 2 boats for free because the owners were stranded. Nora waited. He isn't pretending he cared about this place, Mason said. He just thinks caring should have made it obey him. That sounds hereditary, too. Mason smiled without looking up. Probably. That evening, Beth called. Cal says Mason embarrassed him. Mason disagreed with him. That is often what Cal means. Nora sat on the Junebug's roof with her feet on the stern deck. The water was glassy beneath a darkening sky. What do you want me to do? Come to dinner tomorrow, Mom? He'll be here. Then no, I'm not asking you to make peace. I'm asking you to explain the offer where nobody can leave without putting on shoes. He left my boat with shoes on. Please. The word was quiet and unadorned. Nora went. Beth served pot roast in the dining room because, as Mason whispered, nothing encouraged emotional honesty like a meal requiring a carving knife. Cal arrived last. He kissed Beth's cheek, nodded to Mason, and treated Nora as a feature of the wallpaper. No one mentioned the marina until dessert. Beth brought coffee, sat at the end of the table, and folded her hands. I want to buy Cal's interest in the equipment Nora selected. Cal stared at her. You what? Not the company, the listed assets. You're half of their agreed value. There is no agreed value. I'll pay the amount in Nora's offer for your interest, in cash. Mason can sell his interest to Nora on the 3-year terms. Nora put down her fork. We didn't discuss this. No. If we had, you would have refused to come. Where are you getting the money? Cal asked. The inheritance. That money is for your retirement. It's mine. You told me you needed security. I do. Then why would you put it into used marina equipment? Beth's fingers tightened together. I'm not investing in equipment. I'm buying your share and selling it to Nora on the same terms she offered you. So, you take the risk. Yes. Nora shook her head. I'm not taking your money. Beth looked at her. You aren't. You'll sign an installment agreement. You'll pay interest. If you default, the assets return to me. That's not the same risk Cal is taking. No. Cal gets cash now. Cal pushed his coffee away. This is absurd. Why? Because you're letting her turn a family inheritance into a bargain bin sale. Beth's face changed. We already did that when we handed her keys to a boat with no engine and acted like it was funny. Mason looked down. Cal's voice hardened. That boat was specifically left to her, and we were relieved. You got the company, I got the house, and money. Nora got something we thought was useless, so none of us had to sacrifice anything. Nora got the shore lease. Nora earned the shore lease. The room went silent. Beth continued. You knew Grace rejected the company. You may not have known Nora signed, but you knew the problem existed. I defended you anyway because you've helped me, and because I was afraid if I admitted you were wrong, I'd have to admit how often I let you decide what was practical for everyone. Cal looked genuinely hurt. After everything I've done for you? Yes, Beth said. That sentence is the problem. He stood and went to the kitchen. Nobody stopped him. They heard water run. A cabinet opened, then closed. Cal returned carrying Vivian's cream mug with the red letters. Nora had forgotten Beth owned an identical one. Vivian had bought both at a roadside shop. Cal turned it in his hands. She called me the night Grace refused renewal, he said. Nora waited. I told her not to sign anything desperate. I said I'd find a buyer who could deal with Grace. He looked at the mug, not at them. Mom said selling was all I ever offered because it was the only kind of help that let me leave afterward. Beth's eyes closed briefly. Cal sat. I thought she was being cruel, he said. She probably was, Nora replied. That doesn't mean she was wrong. His mouth tightened, but he did not argue. Nora slid a clean copy of the offer across the table. The price is fair, she said. Not generous, fair. I'll pay delivery and installation. I'll accept the inspection risk after delivery. The company keeps the fuel dispensers, the tanks, and the Vail Marina Services name. Mason looked at Cal. We stopped paying storage on everything else, Beth added. You get cash for your interest. I get the same repayment terms Nora offered you. Cal read the page beneath the dining room light. No one rushed him. At last he looked at Nora. You missed 2 payments. The agreement defaults. 1, she said, with a 30-day cure period. 2, 1, 45 days. 30, 45. Cal glanced at Mason, then Beth. Bring me the final papers, he said, and inspection reports. I'm not selling you rust because everyone suddenly wants me to feel guilty. He pushed the offer back across the table. It was not an apology. It was not forgiveness, but it was the first thing he had given her that did not require her to disappear. The inspection found rust. Not enough to condemn the lift, but enough to replace 2 hydraulic lines, a cable, and 1 section of support frame. 3 dock fingers had soft boards beneath paint that looked solid from above. Half the electrical pedestals failed ground fault testing. The compressor leaked. 1 service jack lowered itself slowly whenever Ron sat on it. Demonstration purposes, he said from 6 inches closer to the floor. The final value came in lower than Nora's offer. Cal read the reports at Beth's dining room table, pressed his thumb against the photographs, and argued each deduction. Nora expected him to accuse her inspectors of bias. Instead, he called the lift manufacturer, Haskell, and a dock builder he had known for 20 years. When the dock builder confirmed the estimates, Cal hung up and said, "Fine," the word cost him. The final agreement gave Beth Cal's interest in the selected equipment in exchange for immediate payment. Mason's half transferred directly to Nora under the 3-year installment schedule. Beth sold her newly acquired interest to Nora on identical terms, with the 45-day cure period. Nora accepted the equipment after delivery and inspection, along with the repair costs. The company kept the fuel dispensers, underground system responsibility, and Vail Marina Services name. Cal insisted the spare parts drawers be described as assorted mechanical inventory, rather than unidentified screws. Mason inserted both phrases. They signed at Beth's table. Cal used Vivian's brass letter opener to separate his copy from the staple packet, though no page required opening. "You know that isn't a knife," Nora said. "It has 1 function. It opened Christmas cards. It has 2 functions." Beth wrote the first check. Her hand did not shake until she placed it in front of Cal. He looked at the amount, then at his sister. "You could still change your mind." "So could you." He put the check inside his coat. Nora gave Beth the first scheduled payment the next morning. Beth accepted it, wrote a receipt at the Junebug's galley table, and counted the cash twice. "You don't have to count it in front of me," Nora said. "I'm your lender. You're enjoying that." "A little." Beth folded the receipt into Vivian's mug, where Nora would find it after she left. Haskell delivered the dock sections on a Tuesday under heavy clouds. The flatbed backed down the launch ramp, while Ron directed it with gestures so dramatic the driver eventually stopped watching him. Mason came in work clothes. Cal came in a sport coat, remained for 10 minutes, then removed the coat and placed it on a piling. "You'll ruin your shoes," Nora said. He looked at her rubber boots. "Not everyone has emergency footwear. They worked the whole day." The crane set each dock finger beside the main walkway. Nora and Mason guided the hinges into position, while Cal called measurements and Ron complained that every bolt manufactured after 1995 was made of cheese. Grace stood on shore with the repair plans and halted installation twice when an anchor line crossed the public launch channel. Cal began arguing the second time. Then he looked at Nora and stopped. "Move the anchor," he told the crew. By evening, 12 additional slips stretched into the inlet. They were mismatched in color and age. 3 had new boards, 4 had old green trim, and 1 section remained primer gray because the weather turned before Nora could paint it. They looked nothing like Nolan Pierce's brochure might have imagined. They floated. The lift installation took another 2 weeks and nearly emptied Nora's account again. The repaired support frame needed a new footing. The crane operator charged for an extra half day. An electrical inspector found a disconnect switch that had passed for years and chose that moment to become unacceptable. Nora paid the bills, then sat on the Junebug's stern deck with her calculator and considered selling one of her kidneys. Ron looked over her shoulder. "You'd get less than the lift repair. It has low mileage, questionable maintenance history." She made the next lease payment with 3 days to spare. The expanded slips did not fill immediately. 2 former customers had signed elsewhere. Mr. Talbot remained angry enough to drive past the entrance without slowing. Leonard Foss recommended Nora to a friend, who arrived expecting a discount and left when she declined. A spring cold snap delayed launches, and the first winter storage customer complained that the shrink wrap Nora subcontracted had wrinkled near a vent. Nora inspected it, agreed, and paid to have it redone. 6 slips became 11. 11 became 15. She left the remaining 3 empty, rather than cut rates below what safe maintenance cost. Vivian would have filled them with friends of friends and trusted July to solve the math. Nora wrote every empty slip into her budget as a loss, and slept better for knowing its name. The old office stayed mostly closed. Nora used it for package storage and storms too severe for the June bug. The boat remained the place customers came to ask questions, pay invoices, complain about gulls, and drink coffee while pretending not to seek company. Inez's breakfast counter grew from a folding table to a narrow service window in the galley. She paid Nora a percentage and supplied a compact griddle designed for boats. The first time she cooked on it, the smoke detector sounded until Ron removed the battery. Nora put the battery back. "Rules are suffocating enterprise," he said. "Smoke is suffocating customers." The fixed workbenches in the repair shed became a maintenance cooperative. Nora rented bench hours to boat owners and required anyone doing engine work to carry away oil and solvents. Ron offered paid inspections 2 mornings a week, though he described the money as forced upon him. Beth came on Wednesdays. At first she brought food and looked for tasks. Later, she began arriving without offerings. She learned the reservation program, answered the marina phone, and stopped promising customers that Nora would make an exception. Once, when Cal called during her shift, Beth spoke to him for 20 minutes on the repair shed porch. She returned with red eyes and entered a winter storage payment without mentioning the call. Nora did not ask. Forgiveness did not arrive as a single clean thing. It accumulated in returned phone calls, correctly tied lines, and the absence of excuses where excuses had once been automatic. Some days Nora trusted her mother. Other days Beth moved Vivian's mug without asking, and resentment rose so quickly it seemed preserved beneath the floorboards. Beth learned to put the mug back. Mason finished the last of the Belford contracts and convinced Cal to sell the fuel dispensers to a marina 2 counties away. The offer was lower than Cal wanted, but higher than continued storage deserved. Vail Marina Services refunded the 3 remaining disputed customers, paid Haskell, and closed its operating accounts. Cal kept the company name. Nora did not ask for it. Locals called the place Vail Marina anyway. When someone asked whether that was official, Nora said the water had not filed paperwork. She painted no grand sign. Beside the Junebug's door, Inez's small board still read, "Slips, ask Nora." Cal visited twice that summer. The first time, he brought the lift's original service manual, which had been found in Mason's garage beneath Vivian's swivel chair. "You should lubricate the upper pulleys monthly," he said. "I read the manual. This copy has Dad's notes." Nora took it. Her grandfather's handwriting filled the margins with measurements, weather dates, and complaints about manufacturer instructions. "Thank you." Cal looked toward the new slips. "Finger 7 sits low. It's carrying a larger electrical conduit. Still sits low. I'll check it." He nodded and left. The second time, he arrived after a storm and walked the docks without telling anyone. Nora watched from the Junebug, but did not go out. He tightened one loose fender line at C9, stood for a while at the empty fuel pad, and drove away. In August, Nora made her installment payment early. By September, she had enough set aside to replace the Junebug's ancient heater before winter. Ron found a used marine engine listed for sale at a price Nora could technically afford if she delayed painting the last dock section and lived on soup. He showed her the listing aboard the boat. "Same model as the old one," he said. "Low hours, owners moving inland." Nora studied the photographs. Fresh black paint, clean hoses, a propeller without visible damage. For months, the absence beneath the plywood cover had seemed temporary, a wound awaiting the correct part. Now the compartment held customer files, emergency supplies, tools, and the cash box bolted to a reinforced frame. "If we install it," Ron said, "we relocate all this, reinforce the transom, replace controls, steering cable too. How much?" He waited. Nora swore. "Good," he said. She closed the listing. "I don't want it." Ron peered at her. "Too expensive?" "That too." "Then why?" Nora looked through the galley window at the docks, the repair shed, Inez's service table, and Beth entering payments beneath the porch light. "Where would I go?" Ron nodded as though that were a mechanical answer. He used the engine listing to wrap a leaking jar of sealant. The first anniversary of Vivian's death arrived on a clear October morning. Mrs. Patel proposed a memorial sale. Inez called it a regatta, because regatta sounded as though people might buy breakfast. By the time Nora learned of it, 14 boat owners had signed up, none of whom seemed concerned that half their vessels were not sailboats. Nora refused speeches. No speeches, Inez agreed, just remarks. That is the same thing. Remarks are shorter and less honest. Beth brought Vivian's old brass dock bell from the inland house. It had hung beside the back door for decades, rung whenever dinner was ready or a storm approached. The metal was dark with tarnish, and the clapper had been replaced with a steel nut tied to cord. "Does it belong here?" Beth asked. She did not say Vivian would have wanted it. She did not say family legacy. She held the bell and waited. Nora looked at the empty hook beside the Junebug's galley door. "Here," she said. Beth mounted it while Nora held the screws. Mason arrived wearing jeans and work gloves. He took registrations at the fuel dock beneath the silent green canopy, directing boats toward open water and handing out Inez's muffins. Nobody asked him to. He stayed when the first batch of coffee ran out and made more badly. Cal did not come. At 11, the boats gathered beyond the inlet. Mrs. Patel's white sailboat led, followed by fishing boats, cabin cruisers, pontoons, and Ron's work skiff, which had been washed for the occasion and looked insulted by it. Nora stood on the Junebug's stern deck. Inez leaned out the service window. "You have to say something." "No. People are staring. They can look at the lake." Beth stood beside the brass bell. Mason waited on the dock, coffee stains down the front of his shirt. Grace occupied a folding chair in her red raincoat and trout slippers. Nora looked at the faces along the docks, people Vivian had undercharged, overpromised, scolded, helped, and sometimes driven crazy. People who had trusted Nora only after watching what she did when there was no engine, no lift, no fuel, and no room left for pretending. She would have hated the anchor flowers, Nora said. Laughter moved through the crowd. She would have said this wasn't a regatta. She would have corrected how half of you tied up. And she would have asked why we were standing around when there was work. More laughter, softer this time. Nora touched the Junebug's rail. "So, we'll keep it short." Beth rang the bell. Its sound crossed the inlet, clear and deeper than Nora expected. The boats answered with horns, one after another, until the cove filled with noise. Later, while everyone ate at folding tables beside the repair shed, a man Nora did not know stepped aboard the Junebug and studied the helm. "Beautiful old boat," he said. "What kind of engine?" "It doesn't have one." He looked surprised. "Then what's the point of a houseboat that can't go anywhere?" Nora glanced through the window. Beth was showing Mason how to make coffee without filling the filter to the rim. Grace had cornered Ron about an unlabeled oil container. Inez was selling the last muffin twice by cutting it in half. Beyond them, 18 slips floated on repaired anchors, 15 occupied, 3 waiting. Nora rang the brass bell once. "The point," she said, "is that it's already where it belongs.